So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Tsunade asks Naruto to save his Senju clan, save her Senju clan from using harem techniques. So yeah, this is gonna be a very interesting video, so watch till end. And if you have any suggestions, so then comment down your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right back into the video.
This video divided in 6 chapters, so let's start with chapter 1. The wrong century. The rift didn't close so much as collapse. 1 second Naruto was standing in the middle of the battlefield, hands locked with Tsunade's as they both poured chakra into the destabilizing Kamui tear that Obito's dying body had left behind. A wound in space that was pulling everything near it sideways, folding light, swallowing sound. The next second, there was a sound like the universe clearing its throat, and then nothing. No ground, no sky, no war, just white. And then, very suddenly, a rice field. They hit it at a speed that would have killed anyone who wasn't who they were. Naruto went in face first, plowing a furrow through waterlogged soil that sent birds scattering from every tree within 100 meters. Tsunade hit 6 meters to his left, rolled twice with the controlled grace of someone who had been thrown hard enough to leave craters before, and came up on one knee with her fists raised and her strength of 100 seal blazing gold across her forehead. There was nothing to punch, just rice paddies, rolling hills in every direction, a wood and thatch farmhouse in the far distance, smoke curling from a hole in its roof that functioned as a chimney. Naruto surfaced from the mud, spitting dirt. What? He turned in a full circle. What just where's quiet? Kurama's voice inside his skull. Not loud, carefully calibrated the way the fox spoke when he wanted Naruto to actually listen instead of react. Be quiet and breathe and think before you do anything at all. Naruto was quiet. He breathed. He thought. The first thing he noticed was the chakra. Or rather, the absence of the chakra signatures he'd been swimming in for months. The massive, familiar presences of his friends, his enemies, the tailed beasts, the cage, all of it gone. The second thing he noticed was that the natural energy here was different, not wrong exactly, just unfiltered, like the difference between river water and water that had been sitting in a pipe system for a century. The pipe water wasn't better, it had just been shaped. What he was sensing now was raw, unshaped. Almost startlingly alive. Tsunade had already closed her eyes. Her diagnostic training kicked in faster than conscious thought. She was reading the environment through chakra the way doctor reads a patient's pulse before asking any questions. When she opened her eyes, her face was doing something Naruto had almost never seen on it. It was afraid. Naruto. Her voice was flat, controlled, the specific flatness of someone who was choosing their words very carefully because the alternative was screaming. What year do you think it is? What? He stopped. It's during the war. We were just in the. There is no war. She didn't let him finish. Not the one we were in. There's no chakra network infrastructure anywhere in range of my diagnostic sense. No summoning array residue, no modern jutsu signatures of any kind. She looked at the farmhouse, at the hills, at the sky as though the sky could tell her something. The chakra here hasn't been refined at all. This is what nature energy feels like before humans build anything on top of it. A pause. We went the wrong direction through the rift. The wrong direction. It took Naruto 3 full seconds to process what she meant. They hadn't been sent forward. They'd been sent back. How far back? Kurama asked in his head. Tsunade heard nothing, obviously, but answered the question as if she had. At least 60 years, possibly more. I won't know for certain until I find someone to talk to. She looked at her hands, still glowing faintly with seal energy, still 100% combat ready, completely useless for the problem she was actually facing. I need landmarks. I need context. She stopped. 12 men had emerged from the tree line to the east. They were not small men. They were the product of generations of constant warfare, every one of them moving with the low center of gravity ease of people who had been learning to kill since before they could write. Their armor was bone and iron, practical and brutal, designed for a world where you fought every single day. The crest on their chest plates was weathered and stylized differently than the version Naruto knew, but it was unmistakable. A leaf. A wave. The mark of the Senju. The 12 men had their weapons out. Not pointed directly at them yet. More the posture of warriors who hadn't decided whether they were dealing with a threat or something weirder. But the intent was clear. Naruto's hand moved to where his kunai holster wasn't because it had been destroyed in the rift collapse, and then he dropped the hand and raised both of them slowly, palms out. "Hey," he said, "we're friendly." The 12 men did not look like they agreed. One of them, taller than the others, with a burned scar that covered the entire left side of his face and eyes that had seen enough to be permanently, quietly tired, stepped forward. He didn't lower his weapon. He scanned them both in about 4 seconds, the assessment fast and unsentimental. "You hit this field from the sky," the scarred man said. His accent was strange, the same language but older rhythms, clipped vowels, the specific cadence of someone who had never heard refined Fire Country speech. "No parachute, no flying jutsu that I've ever seen manage that speed and survive." He looked at the crater Naruto had made, then at Naruto, who was covered in rice paddy mud from his hairline to his sandals. "You're not dead." "Yeah," Naruto confirmed. "That's interesting." Then Naruto made his first mistake. He'd been trying to stabilize himself since the landing. Kurama's chakra moving through his system automatically, correcting the disorientation, warming the cold shock out of his muscles. He hadn't been paying attention to how visible it was. Most people in his era were used to the presence of a Jinchuriki and their signature. There were warning systems, chakra suppressants, official protocols. In a rice paddy in what was apparently the Warring States period, surrounded by 12 Senju warriors who had never seen a tailed beast-class chakra signature in their lives. The sudden amber-gold flare of Kurama's chakra bleeding through Naruto's skin looked, apparently, like the sun had decided to become a person. 4 of the 12 men bolted. Not ran, bolted, the specific velocity of people whose survival instincts had completely overridden their pride. 3 more went flat on the ground, face down, which Naruto only understood later was a gesture of submission so old it predated formal clan structures. The remaining 5 held. Barely. He could see their legs shaking from 15 meters away. The scarred man didn't run. He didn't prostrate. He didn't shake. He just watched with those exhausted, calibrated eyes and waited to see what happened next. "Seal it down," Kurama said, sharp and immediate. Now, Naruto sealed it. The amber light vanished. The 5 standing warriors let out a collective breath like they'd been holding it for a week. The scarred man said, "Can you do that again?" "Do what? Control it like that? Turn it off?" Naruto blinked. "Yeah, good." The scarred man finally, slowly lowered his weapon. "My name is Senju Kazuura. This is my clan's territory. You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't treat you as a threat before my men stop being impressed and start being professional about this." Tsunade stepped forward before Naruto could open his mouth. It was the right instinct. Naruto was about to say something honest and chaotic, and she knew it. "My name is Tsunade," she said. She used only the first name. The Senju surname she had already calculated was a card she couldn't play until she understood the board. "I'm a healer. He's my—" She glanced at Naruto. Naruto gave her nothing helpful. "Companion, we arrived here through a technique that went wrong. We're not armed, we're not at war with your clan, and we have no territorial interests." She met Kazuura's eyes. "But I could hear some of your men when we landed. There's someone in your camp with an infection that's going to kill them by morning. I could fix that in 10 minutes. A pause. "If you'd like—" Kazuura looked at her for a long moment. "How do you know that?" he asked. "Because I can hear his fever," she said simply. It wasn't quite true. She diagnosed it through chakra, not hearing, but it landed correctly. Kazuura made a decision. He sheathed his weapon, turned, and walked back toward the tree line. "Follow," he said. The Senju encampment was bigger than either of them had expected and worse than either of them had hoped. It sprawled across a natural clearing, backed against a rock face that provided defensive depth. Whoever had chosen the site knew what they were doing. The structures were semi-permanent, wood and hide, designed to be broken down and moved in a day if the clan needed to relocate. There were maybe 200 people here. Naruto counted 112 fighters by posture alone. The rest a mix of older clan members, children and people who occupied the complicated middle zone of a population that couldn't afford to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. Too many bandages. Too many people moving with the careful economy of the badly injured, trying not to show it. A smell that Tsunade identified in 3 seconds as wound rot mixed with inadequate quarantine. She stopped pretending to be a casual traveler at approximately that moment. "How long has the medical situation been this bad?" she asked Kazura, walking beside him. "Define bad." "Treatable injuries becoming fatal, infections spreading between patients, running out of supply." 2 months, Kazura said without particular emotion. "We had a healer. She died in a river crossing." He paused. "She was 63. There was nobody to replace her." Tsunade was already moving toward the medical tent. It wasn't a medical tent, exactly. It was a supply tent that had been repurposed. The reorganization done by someone who tried hard and had no formal training. She did a full survey in 4 minutes, pulling back coverings, checking pulses, reading chakra signatures with a diagnostic precision that was so far beyond anything this era possessed that the 2 clan members watching her from the tent entrance had simply stopped pretending to be guards and were just staring. The man with the infection was in the far corner. He was 28 years old and built like a cliff face, and he was losing to a wound on his leg that had started as a clean cut 6 days ago and had been improperly cleaned since. His fever was 40.2 degrees. Without intervention, Kazura's estimate of by morning was correct. Tsunade sat beside him, pressed 2 fingers to his leg and got to work. The green glow of medical ninjutsu, clean, controlled, impossibly precise, flooded the tent. The man's eyes opened. He looked at his leg. He looked at Tsunade. He looked back at his leg. "What are you? Don't move," she said, in the voice she used that made even Naruto comply immediately. He didn't move. She worked for 11 minutes. The infection didn't so much recede as get systematically dismantled. She found the bacterial concentration point, neutralized it, repaired the tissue damage, restructured the healing environment so his own body could finish the job. When she removed her hand, the wound that had been suppurating and angry was clean pink healing flesh. She stood up, turned around, and found that every person in the tent had silently gathered behind her, the 2 guards at the entrance, 3 people who'd been tending other patients. Kazura. And behind Kazura, half the walking capable population of the camp, because word had moved through a community of 200 people in 11 minutes with the speed that only gossip and miracles achieve. Tsunade looked at all of them. "Who's next?" she said. It took 4 hours. Not because there were that many critical patients, there were 6, including the man with the infection, but because Tsunade didn't stop at critical. She worked through every person in the camp with a medical need, including a child with a broken wrist that had been set wrong 3 weeks ago and had begun healing at the wrong angle, and an older woman with a heart arrhythmia that she hadn't mentioned to anyone because in this era you simply didn't mention things like that. You waited. Naruto spent those 4 hours with Kazura, not intentionally at first. Kazura had things to do, a camp to run, warriors to brief, the ongoing business of keeping 200 people alive in a world that was actively trying to kill them. But he kept drifting back to wherever Naruto was, asking short questions, watching the answers. The questions were tactical. How had they survived the landing? Where had they come from? What kind of technique produced that chakra signature? Naruto answered honestly where he could and deflected where he couldn't, which wasn't as often as he'd expected. Kazura's questions were the questions of a man who wanted operational information, not philosophy. He was building a picture. Naruto let him build it. "You're not Senju?" Kazura said at one point. It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation he was filing. "No," Naruto confirmed. "Uzumaki." Naruto paused. His coloring, his whisker marks, his chakra signature, Kazuya had probably been putting it together for the last hour. "Close enough," he said. Kazuya nodded slowly. "There's an Uzumaki enclave east of here. 3 days' travel. They've been quiet for the last season." He looked at Naruto sideways. "Too quiet, maybe." Naruto stored that. He'd follow up on it later. Right now, he had a more immediate problem, which was that the camp's strongest fighter, a man named Goro, who was built like 2 regular men wearing a person suit, had spent the last hour failing to look like he wasn't sizing Naruto up. Naruto had noticed. He'd been letting it sit, waiting to see what the man decided to do with it. Goro decided. He walked over with the specific casualness of someone being very deliberate about looking casual, rolled his neck, and said, "You're Uzumaki, they say." "Sure," Naruto said. "Uzumaki are strong." The word strong had a specific weight in how he said it, not a compliment exactly, a category, a thing to be measured. "You don't look strong." Naruto looked down at himself, covered in dried mud, one sandal slightly bent from the landing, hair doing something catastrophic. "Yeah," he agreed. "I see your point." "I want to test something," Goro said. "Okay," Naruto said. Goro drew back his arm, chakra flooding into it. A technique the era called iron body, an old senju discipline that hardened muscle and bone to near stone density, and brought it forward in a strike aimed at Naruto's chest. Naruto caught it, one hand. Not a block, a catch, fingers closing around Goro's fist, absorbing the impact with a stillness that was almost insulting in how minimal the effort looked. Goro's forward momentum stopped. Dead. As though he'd struck a wall of the world, Naruto didn't push back, didn't twist the arm. Didn't demonstrate anything further. He just held it, met Goro's eyes, and waited. Goro pushed harder. The chakra in his arm spiked. Naruto felt it, the genuine effort, the man going to his limit. The limit hit Naruto's grip and stopped. After 5 seconds, Naruto released him. "You're strong," Naruto said, completely genuinely. "For real, that technique is solid." He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm a little stronger." Goro stared at him. Then, slowly, he nodded, the single nod of a warrior who has received information he's going to be thinking about for a long time. He walked away. Kazuya had watched the whole thing. He didn't say anything about it, but something in his posture changed, a small recalibration, the kind that happens when a man who thought he was evaluating a guest realizes he's been looking at a variable that's larger than his current framework. That night, Kazuya found them both. Not in the main camp, outside it, on a slight rise that looked down over the clearing. Tsunade was sitting with her back against a tree, doing the thing she did after heavy healing work, where she sat very still and let her body recover without drawing attention to the fact that it needed to. Naruto was next to her, not sitting, not standing, sort of crouched in the way he'd done since he was 12 that had never fully evolved into anything more dignified. Kurama was quiet in the back of his mind, listening. Kazuya sat across from them without invitation, which told Naruto he'd decided something. "I'm going to ask you something," Kazuya said, "and I want a real answer." Tsunade opened her eyes. "All right. Who are you? Not where, not what, who? I don't mean your names, I don't mean your clan. I mean," he searched for the words, and a man who had spent 50 years being practical and unsentimental about almost everything found them in an unexpected place. "I've led this clan for 20 years. I've seen everything this era produces. Strong people, cruel people, clever people. People with gifts from God or devil or both." He looked at Tsunade's hands, still in repose, the hands of a healer, then at Naruto, who looked, objectively, like a teenager who'd lost a fight with a rice paddy. "I've never seen anything like what I watched today, either of you." A pause. "So, who are you and what do you want from us?" Tsunade was quiet for a moment. Naruto waited to see what she decided. She looked out over the camp, at the lights still burning in the medical tent, at the watch fires, at the children he could see at the edge of the clearing, not quite asleep, playing some quiet game that involved small stones and a scratched-out grid in the dirt. Children who were going to grow up to be soldiers in a war that ground through people without pausing to learn their names. "I'm the last of your bloodline," Tsunade said. Her voice was even. She'd made a decision, too. From a future that doesn't exist anymore, both of us are. She looked at Kazura directly. The world we came from, your clan's descendants built something extraordinary, and then watched it fall apart in ways that didn't have to happen. We ended up here because of an accident. We can't go back. She paused. What we want from you is the chance to make sure it doesn't fall apart this time. Kazura was quiet for a long moment. The watch fires crackled. One of the children laughed, a small sound quickly muffled. That's a large claim, he said. Yes, Tsunade agreed. You're saying you're Senju. I'm saying I'm the last one, a beat. I'd like to not be. Kazura looked at her for a long time. He was not a man who processed things quickly. He processed them correctly, which was slower. Finally, he said, the burned man I sent to you tonight. Daisuke. He has a wife and 2 daughters. He's been watching the girls grow up thinking one of them might live to adulthood if he was lucky. He looked at his own hands. 3 hours ago, he picked his younger one up and held her for the first time without flinching from the pain in his leg. Naruto didn't say anything. I don't know if what you're telling me is true, Kazura said. I don't know if it's possible. He stood. But I know what I saw in that tent tonight. He looked at Tsunade. What do you need? Tsunade let out a breath. Small, controlled, the breath of someone who had been carrying something heavy for hours and had just been offered a place to set it down. Time, she said. Resources. Access to your people, and someone who can tell me about the terrain within 3 days, travel in every direction. Kazura nodded once. Daisuke will brief you in the morning, he said. He'll be well enough, thanks to you. He walked back toward the camp. Naruto watched him go. Then he looked at Tsunade. Last of your bloodline, he said quietly. That was a real answer. It was the truest version of a real answer, she said, which was different, and they both knew it. You okay? She was quiet for a second. Around them, the warring state's night was loud in the way that natural things were loud. Insects, wind, a stream somewhere nearby, the distant call of an animal that neither of them recognized. None of the sounds of a world with shinobi infrastructure. No distant jutsu detonations. No hawk summons overhead. Nothing. Ask me again in a year, she said. Naruto looked up at the sky. More stars than he'd ever seen, the absence of any artificial light for 100 miles in every direction meant the sky was full in a way that it never was over Konoha. He found himself thinking, stupidly, that Konoha wouldn't be built for another 80 years. The thought arrived and he couldn't do anything with it except let it sit. You're thinking about the village, Kurama said. Yeah, stop. Think about this camp instead. These people. The girl who is going to be in a refugee column somewhere east of here who you're going to need to find before something else does. A pause. The future you knew is over, Kit. This one is what you have. I suggest you get attached to it. Naruto breathed in. Breathed out. He looked at the camp. At the watch fires. At the 2 children who'd finally given up on their stone game and fallen asleep in the dirt, curled together for warmth because they were safe enough here to sleep outside, barely, contingently, conditionally safe, but safe. Something settled in his chest. Not peace, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but something that felt like the thing that comes before peace. The decision to try. Hey, Tsunade Shishu, he said. Don't call me that, she said reflexively. We should probably figure out where we're going to sleep. She looked around at the camp. At the clan, they had just, in some tentative and undefined way, placed themselves inside. I'm going to sleep in the medical tent, she said, in case anyone needs help overnight. And you'll sleep somewhere that isn't in the medical tent because you will break something. I'm not gonna. You broke a medical tent once before. I was there. Naruto opened his mouth, closed it. That was a training accident, Naruto. I'll find somewhere outside. Tsunade stood. She brushed dried mud off her coat, her Hokage coat, the white one with the red flames on the hem, which was so catastrophically out of place in this century that 3 Senju warriors had already quietly stopped near it to look at it with confused reverence. Not sure if it was a battle robe or a religious garment, she paused before walking back to camp. We're going to build something here, she said. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the camp, at the families, at the children asleep in the dirt. Her voice had an edge to it that Naruto recognized. It was the edge she got when she decided something and wasn't going to undecide it. Something that lasts. Yeah, Naruto said, it's going to be hard. Yeah, harder than anything we've done before. Probably, she nodded. Once. Final, like a signature on a contract. Good, she said. Easy things don't last. She walked back into the camp, and the watchfires made her shadow long across the ground, and the Senju clan parted around her with the small, instinctive deference of people who decided, without a meeting or a vote, that this was someone you got out of the way of. Not from fear. From recognition. Naruto watched until she disappeared into the medical tent. Then he looked up at the sky again. Kurama, yeah, we can do this, right? The fox was quiet for a moment. Not the considering kind of quiet, the kind where the answer was already there, and Kurama was deciding how honest to be. I think, Kurama said finally, that whether you can do it is a lot less interesting than whether you will. Another pause. And I already know the answer to that one. Naruto almost laughed. Was that a compliment? Absolutely not. Go to sleep. He found a spot at the base of the rock face near one of the watchfires, far enough from the medical tent to satisfy Tsunade's conditions. The ground was hard, and the night was cold and somewhere in the eastern dark. 3 days' travel away. There was a refugee column with an Uzumaki girl who could suppress Jonin-level techniques, and didn't know yet that she was going to matter more than she could possibly imagine. Naruto closed his eyes. For the first time since the rift had closed behind them, he slept. End of Chapter 1. No began Chapter 2, The Architect and the Orphan. The rice paddies were gone by the time Naruto came back from his 3rd scouting run. Not literally, they were still there, 3 kilometers south. Still waterlogged and still technically someone's livelihood. But the clearing that the Senju encampment occupied had been quietly, incrementally transformed over 3 weeks in the way that things transform when someone with a very clear picture of what they want and unlimited patience begins working on them without announcing what they're doing. The medical tent had doubled in size. Not through construction, Tsunade had simply identified 2 adjacent storage structures that were being used inefficiently, had a polite but non-negotiable conversation with the men responsible for them, and repurposed the space. The result was something that functioned, for the first time in this camp's history, as an actual medical facility. Organized, categorized, clean in a way that the era didn't have a framework for understanding but instinctively recognized as significant. The wounded recovered faster. That was the framework the clan used. That was enough. Naruto landed at the camp's eastern entrance, dropped from a tree canopy with the casual verticality of someone who had stopped thinking about falls as a relevant category of problem, and was immediately met by a boy of about 9 who had clearly been waiting for him. She said to find her when you got back, the boy said. His name was Haruto. He had serious eyes and the specific solemnity of a child who had grown up faster than children should and had decided to treat that as a credential rather than a wound. She's in the medical tent, Naruto asked. She's never not in the medical tent. This was accurate. In 3 weeks, Naruto had seen Tsunade leave the medical tent for meals, for sleep, which she was doing in approximately 4-hour increments, and once to stand on the rock face and look south for 20 minutes, before returning without explanation. Everything else happened inside or directly adjacent to the tent. He found her at the back, behind a hanging partition that she designated as her private workspace. She had 3 scrolls open simultaneously, each covered in a handwriting so small and precise it looked like the paper had developed a rash. She was cross-referencing them with one hand and running a diagnostic chakra pulse over a clay dish of liquid with the other. Close the partition. She said without looking up. Naruto closed it. Sit down. He sat on the floor because there was only one chair and it was buried under scrolls. Tell me what you found, she said. Eastern territory is mostly clear for about 40 kilometers. 2 minor clans operating at the edge, the Katsub and something that doesn't have a name yet, just a family group, maybe 30 people. Neither of them is a threat to us. He pulled a rough map from inside his jacket. He'd been drawing them on the scouting runs, basic topology that shadow clones had assembled into something coherent. The plateau I found on the second run here, he tapped a spot northeast of the camp, is exactly what you described. Natural water from two directions, defensible high ground. The soil is different up there, richer. I don't know how to explain it, but when I put my hand in it, the nature energy— I know, Tsunade said. She set the clay dish down. I know what you felt. That's why I need to show you something. She finally looked at him, and her expression was doing the specific thing it did when she discovered something that she was going to explain fully, but had already processed 3 layers ahead of the explanation. I've been running diagnostics on the clan children. You told Kazura it was physical conditioning assessments. It is physical conditioning assessments. It's also genetic mapping. She picked up the middle scroll, turned it so he could see it. It was covered in diagrams, chakra pathway structures, rendered in the meticulous notation system she'd apparently invented in the last 2 weeks because the era didn't have one. I've examined 43 children under the age of 12. Standard Senju genetics, overwhelmingly strong chakra volume, good physical resilience, the usual lineage markers. But in 7 of them, she pointed to 7 entries, marked differently. There's something dormant. Naruto leaned in. The diagrams meant almost nothing to him without her explanation, but he recognized the energy signature she'd drawn. He'd seen it in real life. He'd seen it save armies and reshape landscapes. That would release the potential for it. Unactivated. Latent. She set the scroll down. In my era, wood release was considered Hashirama's miracle. His alone. A gift that died with him and couldn't be replicated. Her voice was careful, precise. The voice of someone stating a thing they have strong feelings about and are choosing not to let the feelings into the sentence. It wasn't a miracle. It was a genetic expression that required specific conditions to emerge, conditions that the clan, through a century of constant warfare and crisis, never created. She looked at the partition as though she could see through it to the children outside. These 7 children have the pathway architecture. I can see it. It's like, imagine a river that's been dammed before it forms. The water is there, the current is there, but nothing has ever opened the dam. Naruto was quiet for a second. Can you open it? Not directly. I can't give someone wood release, but I can create the training conditions that allow the expression to activate naturally. Correct chakra development at the right age, with the right physical and dietary support, and the pathways deepen instead of lying dormant. She paused. I've already started with Haruto, the kid who met me at the gate. He has the strongest expression signature of the 7. If I'm right, and I'm right. She said it with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who had been right about medicine for 50 years and had stopped apologizing for it. He'll produce his first wood release technique within 2 years, maybe 18 months. The weight of what she was saying settled on Naruto slowly, the way heavy things settle gradually, then all at once. 7 children. Would release. Not one miracle, singular and unrepeatable, but a lineage. A designed, intentional, systematically cultivated lineage. Tsunade Shishu. Don't! This changes everything about the clan's power ceiling. If they go into the next generation with multiple wood release users, I know. Hashirama was the strongest shinobi to ever. I know. Her voice was quiet. Something moved behind her eyes that she didn't put into words. He was my grandfather. I know exactly what he was. A pause. I also know he was one person, and one person, however extraordinary, is a point of failure. She looked at her diagnostic scrolls. 7 isn't. Naruto looked at her for a long moment. She was doing the thing she'd been doing since they arrived, maybe the thing she'd always been doing and he'd never had enough context to see clearly. She was building. Not fighting, not surviving, not enduring. Building. With the specific cold-blooded long-term intentionality of someone who had stopped trusting that things would turn out fine on their own. You cried, he said. After Haruto's first session yesterday, I saw you go behind the rock face. She was quiet for 1 second. No, I didn't, she said. Okay? Naruto said. He left the camp 3 hours later. The Uzumaki enclave to the east had been sitting in the back of his mind since Kazura mentioned it the night they arrived. Too quiet. In the Warring States period, a clan going quiet almost always meant one of two things. They'd been destroyed, or they were hiding because destruction was imminent. Neither option was acceptable. He traveled fast, not at full speed, because full speed left visible evidence in the landscape that he didn't want to explain to anyone who found it later, but fast enough that the 40 kilometers passed in the kind of time that would have been remarkable to anyone who'd witnessed it. He kept his chakra suppressed to ambient, moving through the forest in the sage sensing half-state that let him read the environment without projecting into it. The first sign was the smell, then the sound, or the specific absence of the sounds a populated camp should have made. Then the sight. A clearing that had held maybe 60 people a week ago, now holding 11, huddled at its center around a fire they'd built small and smokeless with the specific discipline of people who were trying very hard not to be noticed. Uzumaki. He could tell from 20 meters, the hair mostly red in varying shades that caught the late afternoon light, but more than the hair, the chakra. Dense and warm and layered in a way that was distinctive, the signature of a bloodline built for endurance rather than explosive power. He felt it the way you feel familiar music. Something in him responded before his conscious mind caught up. He stepped into the clearing with his hands visible. The 11 people reacted instantly. 2 adults with weapons up, 3 teenagers moving the younger children behind them, 1 older woman who didn't reach for a weapon but whose chakra spiked to the kind of density that suggested she didn't need one. "I'm not a threat," Naruto said. "I'm Uzumaki." Distant branch. It wasn't quite a lie. He was an Uzumaki descendant, just 6 or 7 generations removed and from a direction time hadn't arrived at yet. "I heard this enclave went quiet. I came to check." The older woman looked at him for a long moment. She had white hair, red at the roots, and the face of someone who had survived enough things that survival itself had become her primary skill. "There were 60 of us," she said. "The Katsube clan raided 8 days ago. We scattered." She didn't say what happened to the 49 who hadn't made it to this clearing. She didn't have to. Is this everyone? "No, there are others, scattered further east," she paused. "And one who ran south 2 days ago with the youngest children trying to reach the Senju territory." Naruto's sage sensing extended, careful and quiet south. He found her almost immediately. The chakra signature was, wrong was the wrong word. Excessive was closer, like finding a river where you'd expected a stream. For a child who couldn't have been older than 7, the chakra density was absurd. Not in volume alone, but in quality. The specific texture of Uzumaki chakra at its most concentrated. Red tinged even at the sensing level, warm and almost aggressive in how present it was, like it was trying to fill every available space. "She's got 3 children with her," he said. The old woman stared at him. "How did you? I can sense her. She's about 2 kilometers south." He was already turning. "I'll bring them back." "She won't come with a stranger," the old woman called after him. "She doesn't trust. I'll figure it out," he said. He found her in a dry creek bed, the 3 smaller children arranged behind her with the specific placement of someone who had thought very carefully about defensive geometry despite being 7 years old. She had a stick. It was a good stick. She'd chosen it for weight and reach, and she was holding it correctly, which told him someone had taught her. She watched him come down the creek bank without running. That told him something too. "I'm not going with you," she said. "I haven't asked yet," Naruto said. "You were going to." He sat down on a rock at the creek bank, not approaching, not posturing, just sitting at the level of someone who wasn't treating height as a variable in the conversation. "What's your name?" She watched him for 3 seconds, deciding whether the question was a trap. "Mito?" Something moved in his chest. Not quite the shape of the Mito he knew of from history. That Mito was a formality, a name in a textbook, the woman who married Hashirama and became the first Jinchuriki. This Mito was a 7-year-old in a creek bed holding a stick with chakra so dense it made the air feel different around her. I'm Naruto, he said. I've been with the Senju clan for 3 weeks. The Senju are strong, she said. It was the same word Goro had used, the category word. The measurement. Some of them, he said. There's also a healer with them who's stronger than any of the fighters, but she'd tell you strength is the wrong metric. He paused. There are kids your age there? And a medical tent, and actual food, and a healer who will think you're the most interesting person she's seen in 3 weeks if she reads your chakra signature. Maito's eyes narrowed. Why would she think that? Because your chakra is. He searched for the right word. Not exceptional, too much like flattery. Not weird, too dismissive. Unusual, even for Uzumaki. My grandmother says the same thing. A pause. She says it like it's a problem. It's not a problem, Naruto said. It might be the most important thing about you. But it's also just part of you, so don't let anyone make it into a burden. He stood up slowly. The camp is safe. Your grandmother's group is 2 kilometers north. I'll take you to them first, and then we can all go together if they want. He looked at the 3 children behind her. What are their names? She blinked. It was a small tell. She hadn't expected the question. Taro, Seki, and the little one is Hana. She's 4. Hana, Naruto said. He looked at Hana, who had been watching him with the enormous solemn eyes of a 4-year-old assessing a new element in her world. You okay, Hana? Hana looked at Maito. Maito, after a beat, gave a small nod. Hana looked back at Naruto and held up 2 fingers, which apparently meant yes. 2, Naruto confirmed seriously. Got it. Maito looked at him for another moment. The stick didn't lower, but her weight shifted, the defensive geometry of her stance relaxing by approximately 5%. You're strange, she said. Yeah, Naruto agreed. I get that a lot. They reached the Senju camp as the sun was going down. The arrival of 12 Uzumaki refugees, because the old woman and 8 surviving adults had, after a night's consideration, agreed to follow, generated the kind of camp-wide attention that Naruto was getting better at managing. He got them to the medical tent before the crowd could form properly, put the most vulnerable in Tsunade's hands, and then stood at the tent entrance with his arms crossed, and his chakra at a level that communicated give them space without communicating challenge me about it. People gave them space. Maito sat in the corner of the medical tent while Tsunade checked the others, watching everything. She watched the way Tsunade moved, the economy of it, the precision, the absolute confidence of someone who had mastered something so completely that mastery had become invisible. She watched Naruto at the entrance. She watched the Senju clan children who drifted to the tent's edge, curious about the newcomers. Then Tsunade finished with the adults and turned to the children. She was thorough with Taro and Seki, checking for injury, dehydration, the standard diagnostic that she was running on every new arrival now as a matter of policy. Hana fell asleep during her examination, which Tsunade accepted without comment, settling the girl on a mat with a blanket and moving on. Then she got to Maito. The diagnostic pulse lasted 10 seconds. Then 15. Then Tsunade's hand stilled completely, and she sat very quietly for a moment with her eyes closed. When she opened them, she looked at Maito with an expression that Naruto, watching from the entrance, had never seen on Tsunade's face before. It wasn't shock. She'd trained herself out of visible shock decades ago. It was something quieter and more complicated. Recognition, maybe. Or the specific emotion of someone who has been working on a theory for 3 weeks and has just found proof of it from a direction they hadn't anticipated. Your name is Maito, Tsunade said. You heard Naruto say it, Maito said, watchful. I did. Tsunade tilted her head. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Have you ever tried to do Fuinjutsu? Maito reached into her sleeve and produced a scroll, small, worn at the edges, covered in seal arrays in a handwriting that was slightly too large for the complexity of what it was attempting. She set it on the mat between them. Tsunade picked it up. Read it. Her expression did the thing again. Where did you learn this? She said very carefully. I made it up, Maito said. You, Tsunade looked at the scroll, then at Maito. This is a containment seal, a basic one structurally, but the underlying theory, this should take years to develop from first principles. This is who taught you the foundation. My grandmother showed me one seal, for preservation, food storage. Maito pointed at the scroll. I thought if that principle worked, then the inversion should work for containment, so I tried to write that instead. The tent was quiet. Does it work? Tsunade asked. Maito reached into her other sleeve and produced a small clay jar. She handed it to Tsunade. Tsunade opened it. Inside, perfectly preserved, was a piece of fruit that had been cut at least 2 weeks ago. The freshness was impossible by any natural standard. Tsunade handed the jar back. You're going to learn everything I can teach you, she said. It wasn't phrased as an offer. It was phrased as an acknowledgement of something that had already been decided by forces beyond either of them. Starting tomorrow. Maito looked at her for a long, considering moment. 7 years old, sitting in a borrowed blanket in a clan camp she'd arrived in an hour ago, holding a jar of impossible fruit. All right, she said, as though she was granting a concession. Tsunade made a sound that was almost a laugh. That night, after the camp had settled, Tsunade found Naruto on the rock face. She sat beside him without announcing herself. He'd heard her coming for 30 seconds, but she knew that. It was understood between them that his sage sensing range made surprise a courtesy rather than a reality. She carried 2 cups of something that the camp cook had described as tea, and that bore only a theoretical resemblance to any tea Naruto had ever had in the modern era. She handed him one. He drank it. It tasted like bark and optimism. The Uzumaki girl, she said. Maito, he said. Her chakra compatibility with the Senju would release markers. She stopped, started again. In my era, we always assumed Hashirama's would release was pure Senju, a genetic miracle that emerged from inside the bloodline. She looked out over the camp. But Hashirama's wife was Uzumaki. And I've been looking at these lineage markers for 3 weeks, and I couldn't figure out why the 7 children I identified had stronger potential expression than the main clan line. She paused. It's not purely Senju genetics. The activation pathway requires both. The Senju provide the structure. The Uzumaki chakra volume and density provides the pressure, basically. The force that opens the dam. Naruto turned that over in his mind. So Hashirama wasn't an accident, he said. No, he was the first time the conditions aligned correctly. Senju father, Uzumaki mother, or close enough in the bloodlines, by chance. She looked at her cup. What I'm doing with these 7 children isn't chance, it's design. Tsunade. I know, she said. I know what it sounds like. It doesn't sound bad, it sounds like... He thought about it carefully. It sounds like what you've always done, medicine, making the body do what it's capable of instead of what it defaults to. She was quiet for a while. Maito's grandmother is going to want to stay, Naruto said. I know, I'll talk to Kazura in the morning. She paused. I'm also going to propose the plateau. Naruto looked up. Now, we've been here 3 weeks, long enough to know this location isn't sustainable long-term. It's defensible, but it's not dominant. We need higher ground, better water access, and room to expand. She looked north, in the direction of the plateau, as though she could see it through 40 kilometers of dark. I've been building the argument. Kazura is practical, he'll see it. What about the territory clans between here and there? The Katsube are neutralizable through alliance. They're small enough that being absorbed into the Senju structure is genuinely better for them than independent operation. The unnamed family group is a recruitment opportunity. She'd clearly been running this for days. I'll need you to start the groundwork on the plateau before I present the plan. Kazura needs to see something real, not a proposal. Naruto nodded. Shadow clones can start the terraforming. Low chakra output, I'll keep it below anything that registers as a threat signature at distance. A week of work should be enough to make the site visibly different. Good. She drank her bark and optimism tea. One more thing, he waited. The girl, she said. Maito, what she is, the potential she has, I need you to understand that I'm not going to use her as a tool. I know that. I need you to know it explicitly, not just because you trust me generally. She looked at him directly. She's a child. She's lost most of her family. What she has, the chakra, the intellect, the Fuinjutsu instinct, none of that belongs to the clan or to our plan. It belongs to her. A pause. I'll teach her because she deserves to be taught, not because of what it might produce." Naruto held her gaze for a moment, then he looked back out at the camp. "Yeah," he said, "I know, down in the clearing the watchfires burned." In the medical tent, someone had left a light on, the faint green glow of a healing technique, which meant Tsunade had left one of the clan members she'd been training in a basic enough application that they could manage overnight monitoring. A month ago, that wouldn't have been possible. Now it was a quiet normality. In the corner of the medical tent, Mito was probably still awake. She had that look, the look of someone for whom sleep was always a lower priority than the next thing she was trying to figure out. Naruto thought about Kurama's words from the first night. Get attached to this one. He realized, already attached. The plateau's going to need a name, he said. Tsunade considered this with the gravity it apparently deserved. Not yet, she said. You name things when they're finished, not when they're started. You named the medical tent before it was actually one. That was aspirational naming. It's different. How is that different? Because I was the one doing it, she said, in the tone that closed arguments. Naruto laughed quietly so as not to wake the camp. It came out more genuine than he expected, more relaxed, more like himself than anything he'd felt since the rift had closed. There it is, Kurama said, somewhere warm and low behind his consciousness. There what is? The first day you stopped being someone who lost something and started being someone who's building something. Naruto looked at the stars. About time, he said. Yes, Kurama agreed. It is. Below them, the camp breathed in the dark, alive and provisional and beginning. End of Chapter 2. Now start with Chapter 3. The Demon's Bargain. The Uchiha came at dawn. Not dramatically, no war drums, no fire, no coordinated assault designed to terrorize before the first blade was drawn. That was the style of clans that needed psychological advantage to compensate for tactical weakness. The Uchiha didn't need it. They came quietly, 40 strong, moving through the forest north of the plateau construction site with the disciplined silence of warriors who had been doing this since before silence was something you had to practice. They simply appeared at the tree line, weapons sheathed, and waited. Naruto had sensed them 40 minutes earlier. He'd been on the plateau since before sunrise. Shadow clones working through the night had already reshaped the eastern water channels and begun the foundation earthwork for the outer wall. And he'd come up personally to check the progress and make corrections. The nature energy at this altitude was extraordinary, richer than anything he'd felt at the lower camp. The kind of chakra-saturated soil that made sage sensing feel like seeing with your eyes fully open for the first time after weeks of squinting. So when 40 Uchiha appeared in his sensory range, he felt each one individually. Their chakra signatures, their formation. The one at the front who was slightly ahead of the others, not because he'd been placed there, but because he naturally moved that way, the unconscious forward drift of someone who led from instinct rather than assignment. He felt something else, too. Something that made Kurama stir. Sharingan, Kurama said, multiple. The one at the front has it active, reading my chakra from there, from the moment they cleared the tree line. He's been reading you for 3 minutes. Naruto rolled that around. A Sharingan user who'd had 3 minutes of uninterrupted access to his chakra signature knew, not suspected knew, that what they were looking at was categorically different from anything the era produced. There were exactly 2 responses to that information. You attacked because you were afraid. Or you waited because you were curious. The line held. Nobody moved curious then. Naruto dismissed his shadow clones. 60 of them, dispersed across the plateau, gone in a sequence of small pops that probably registered to the Sharingan as 60 individual chakra flares extinguishing simultaneously. He wanted to see the reaction. The line held good. He walked toward them. He didn't rush. He covered the 300 meters between his position and the tree line at a pace that was somewhere between purposeful and relaxed, fast enough to communicate that he wasn't afraid. Slow enough to communicate that he wasn't performing confidence he didn't feel. He kept his hands visible. He kept his chakra compressed to baseline. A bass line that was still, he was aware, like hearing someone playing a piano and realizing the sound is coming from somewhere underground. But bass line was what he had. The man at the front of the line was young. That was the first surprise. 19 years old, maybe 20. Built lean and efficient, the kind of physicality that came from training that prioritized speed over mass. His hair was dark and pulled back, and he wore the Uchiha clan colors, black and red, in a style that was older than the versions Naruto had seen in history books, more functional, less ceremonial. His Sharingan was active, 3 Tamo fully realized in each eye, spinning slowly. He was reading everything. Naruto stopped 10 meters out, close enough to talk, far enough that neither of them was in each other's immediate engagement range, which was the correct diplomatic distance for a first conversation between 2 people who could plausibly kill each other. "You're the one who's been building on the plateau," the young man said, not a question. "Yeah," Naruto said, "that's Uchiha-adjacent territory, historically. It's nobody's territory. There's no structure on it, no permanent habitation, no clan marker." Naruto tilted his head. "There's also no Uchiha clan member who could reasonably hold it against external threat, given the current distribution of your forces northeast toward the river boundary." He paused. "I paid attention on my scouting runs." The Sharingan spun slightly faster. The young man was recalibrating. "You scouted our positions," he said. "I scouted everything within 40 kilometers. Your positions, the Katsube clan, the river clans, the daimyo patrol routes." Naruto crossed his arms. "I wasn't building a picture of threat. I was building a picture of the region. There's a difference." "And what do you see in your picture?" "I see 40 Uchiha warriors at a tree line when they could have attacked 20 minutes ago and chose not to." Naruto met the young man's eyes, the Sharingan, reading and reading, the chakra flow behind those eyes working at full capacity. "Which tells me you're not here to fight. You're here because someone in your command structure has enough intellectual honesty to ask questions before assuming." He paused. "I'm guessing that someone is you." A long silence. "My name is Ryo," the young man said. "I command this unit." "Naruto?" He said. "Just Naruto. Just Naruto." Ryo's eyes stayed on him for another moment. Then, with a deliberateness that Naruto recognized as a significant gesture in a culture where showing your back was a statement, he turned and said something quiet to the warriors behind him. The line relaxed, weapons still accessible, nobody standing down entirely, but the specific posture of 40 men who were shifting from combat, ready to observation mode. Ryo turned back. "Walk with me," he said. They walked east along the plateau's base, parallel to the tree line, neither of them fully inside the forest nor fully in the open. It was, Naruto recognized, a space that belonged to neither of them, which made it, counterintuitively, neutral ground. Ryo talked first. He asked operational questions. How long had the Senju construction been underway? How many people were involved? What were the defensive intentions of the structure being built? His Sharingan was still active, which Naruto accepted. Let him read. The chakra wouldn't lie, and the truth was that Naruto's intentions were exactly what he was about to say they were. "How much do you know about what's happening to the southeast?" Naruto asked, when there was a natural pause. Ryo's eyes sharpened. "Define southeast." "The Kaguya clan's consolidation. 3 months, slow but consistent. Minor clans absorbed or eliminated. Their territory has grown by about 40%. He watched Ryo's expression. "You know about this. We've been monitoring it, and you haven't moved against it. The Kaguya are not currently a threat to Uchiha territory." "They will be," Naruto said. "In approximately 8 months, they'll have enough consolidated force to push north. When they do, they're not going to differentiate between Senju and Uchiha. They're going to push against everything." Ryo stopped walking. "How do you know that?" Naruto had thought carefully about this moment. "The truth, I'm from the future and I have operational knowledge of this era's political mechanics," was both accurate and useless. Nobody operated on that information without proof, and the proof available was too large to deploy this early. What he had instead was the version of truth that functioned, pattern recognition. Because that's what consolidation looks like when it's being externally directed, Naruto said. The Kaguya clan isn't making these decisions organically. The expansion pattern is too clean, too consistent across too many simultaneous fronts for a single clan leadership to coordinate without help. He looked at Ryo directly. Someone is organizing them, running strategy for them. From outside their structure. Ryo was very still. He knows something, Kurama said. Look at his chakra, that landed. What kind of external direction? Ryo asked carefully. I don't have a complete answer yet, Naruto said, which was technically true, but the signature is old. Older than this era's clan politics. Whatever is moving the Kaguya has been operating for a very long time and is patient in a way that organic strategic planning isn't. He let that sit. The point I'm making isn't about the Kaguya. The point is that what I'm building on this plateau and what the Senju are establishing is specifically designed to be the kind of structure that doesn't fall to that kind of pressure. And I'd rather that structure include the Uchiha clan than exclude them. Ryo turned to face him fully. The Sharingan was reading continuously. Naruto could feel it now, a slight pressure in the chakra layer nearest his skin, the Sharingan mapping and cataloging and cross-referencing. You're proposing an alliance, Ryo said. I'm describing a situation where the absence of one is catastrophic for both of us, Naruto said. The alliance is the logical conclusion of the situation. Logical conclusion, Ryo repeated. Something moved in his expression, not quite amusement, but the cousin of it. You talk like a strategist. I talk like someone who's seen what happens when this conversation doesn't happen. He paused. The Senju and Uchiha spending the next 50 years killing each other is the worst possible outcome for both clans and everyone connected to them. I've seen it. I'm not going to pretend I haven't. The words landed the way he'd intended, not as a threat, not as prophecy, but as the plain statement of someone who was tired of watching things break and was out here in the cold at dawn specifically to prevent it. Ryo looked at him for a long, long moment. You said you've seen it, he said. I said I've seen it. That implies a specific kind of knowledge. It does. Are you going to explain that knowledge? Not today, Naruto said. Today I'm asking you a simpler question. Can you have a conversation with someone outside your clan without it becoming a military engagement? Because if the answer is no, this is already over. Ryo's jaw tightened, then slowly it released. I'm having a conversation with you right now. Yeah, Naruto said. You are. A pause. The forest was mourning quiet around them, birds starting up in the canopy, light coming through in long diagonal bars that hit the ground gold. It was genuinely beautiful, the kind of beauty that the Warring States period had in complete indifference to what was happening inside it. My clan head will want to know about this conversation, Ryo said. Tell him everything, Naruto said. I'd prefer he has accurate information about what I'm proposing than inaccurate information about what I'm threatening. And if his response is military, Naruto uncrossed his arms. He looked at Ryo, at the Sharingan, which had been reading him for 20 minutes and had built a picture that Ryo was still processing. He made a decision. I want to show you something, Naruto said. Just you, your choice whether you come. They went 30 meters into the forest, away from the watching line of Uchiha warriors. Naruto stood in a small clearing, bare dirt and old roots, and he looked at Ryo and said, Don't attack, don't run, just watch. Then he released it. Not fully, not the complete Kurama mode that would have been visible from the coast, not the 6 paths amplification that was no longer available to him anyway. A controlled release. 10% of his full Kurama partnership output, held steady, a sustained demonstration rather than an explosive display. The amber gold light came up around him like a second body made of fire. Kurama's chakra, shaped and directed, pressing against the air with a pressure that bent the grass at the clearing's edge flat. The chakra cloak manifested, incomplete at this output level, more a suggestion of the full form than the form itself. But enough. Enough to show the outline of something immense and ancient and absolutely real behind the human-shaped vessel containing it. The temperature in the clearing rose by several degrees. Ryo's Sharingan went to maximum spin, 3 Tamo becoming almost a continuous ring, the eye processing at the absolute limit of its capacity, reading and reading and reading. Naruto held it for 15 seconds. Steady. Then he sealed it back down, the light went out, the temperature normalized. The grass slowly began to straighten. Ryo hadn't moved. He was standing in the same position, weapons untouched, exactly as still as he'd been when the light came up. His breathing was controlled, but not perfectly controlled. There was a tell in the rhythm, a slight acceleration that he was managing through discipline rather than ease. That, Naruto said quietly, is 10% of what I can do, controlled and suppressed. He met Ryo's eyes. I could level every Uchiha encampment in Fire Country before sunset. Not because I'm strong, because the thing I carry is strong, and I've had years to understand how to use it precisely. He didn't let the statement become a threat by adding anything aggressive. He just let it exist as information. I'm choosing not to. That choice isn't fear. It's not tactical. It's a values decision. He paused. The alliance I'm offering you is built on that decision. I want you to understand what you'd be allying with. Ryo was quiet for a very long time. When he spoke, his voice was steady, not the steadiness of someone who wasn't shaken, but the steadiness of someone who had decided that being shaken wasn't useful. The Sharingan can't fully map what I just read, he said. The chakra volume exceeded my eye's capacity to quantify it. Yeah, Naruto said. That's going to keep happening if we work together. There's going to be a lot of things that exceed existing frameworks. He tilted his head. The question is whether you're curious about that or afraid of it. Ryo looked at him. I'm Uchiha, he said. We don't have the luxury of being afraid of things that are more powerful than us. We have to understand them. A pause that held everything. What do you need from us? Right now, nothing. Go back to your clan. Tell your clan head what you saw. Tell him what I said. Naruto looked up at the plateau. And tell him that in 3 months, when the structure up there is finished, there's going to be a meeting. Everyone who wants to be part of what comes next is invited. Everyone who wants to keep doing what we've been doing for the last 50 years is welcome to stay home. He looked back at Ryo. I'd rather you were at the meeting. Ryo held his gaze for a moment, then he nodded, the single nod, the warrior's acknowledgement. I'll deliver your message. He turned to go, got 3 steps, then stopped. The chakra, he said without turning around, the tailed beast inside you. Yes, Naruto said. Is it aware? Does it think? Naruto almost smiled. Of all the questions Ryo could have asked, that was the one that told him the most about the man asking it. Not is it dangerous, not can I defeat it. Does it think? Yes, Naruto said. And for what it's worth right now, it's telling me you asked the right question. Ryo was quiet for a second. Then he walked back to his line, and the 40 Uchiha warriors dissolved back into the forest the same way they'd come, quietly, efficiently, leaving almost no trace that they'd been there at all. Well, Kurama said, that went better than I expected. You expected it to go badly. I expected you to say something impulsive in the first 5 minutes and have to recover from it. You managed about 20 minutes before you started monologuing. That wasn't monologuing. That was strategic communication. Naruto? Fine. It was a little bit of monologuing. The result was good, Kurama said, and the warmth in it was buried under layers of fox dignity, but it was there. He'll come back. Tsunade was waiting for him at the plateau's edge. She'd known, she always knew, the same way he always sensed her coming. Shadow clone intelligence network, probably, or just the specific instinct of someone who'd been running operations long enough that her threat assessment ran in the background automatically. She looked at the forest where the Uchiha had been. How did it go? She said. They'll send a message back to the clan head. Give it 3 weeks. He came to stand beside her, looking out over the plateau construction, the reshaped channels, the foundation work, the beginning of something that was starting to look, from the right angle, like it was always supposed to be there. The kid who led the unit, Ryo, he's the one we need to keep alive and influential. Define influential. Clan head, eventually. His position on the Senju-Uchiha relationship is workable. He's not soft and he's not naive, but he's genuinely curious about things that are bigger than his current framework, which means he can grow. Naruto watched the clouds move over the plateau. The current clan head is old and sick. The succession is going to be contested. If Ryo doesn't come out on top, one problem at a time, Tsunade said, not dismissively, strategically. The plateau first, then the Uchiha succession. The Kaguya are moving faster than the outline suggested, Naruto said. I told Ryo. He already knew something was wrong with the consolidation pattern, he just didn't have the framework to name it. Tsunade's expression changed. You told him about the external direction? Not by name, the pattern. He paused. He's Sharingan level perceptive. Give him the right data point and he builds the picture himself. That's better than me telling him what to think. She considered that. You're getting better at this. At what? Strategy. She said it like she was slightly surprised and was choosing to be fair about the surprise. You were always good at the moment, the battle, the conversation, the reach. You were terrible at the architecture, the 3 moves ahead thinking. She looked at the plateau. You're getting better. Naruto was quiet for a second. Kurama helps. Don't give me credit, Kurama said. You're doing it yourself. I'm just here to tell you when you're about to do something catastrophically stupid, which is helping, I suppose. What's next? Naruto asked Tsunade. Tonight, I present the plateau plan to Kazuya. She pulled a scroll from her sleeve, her presentation, the argument she'd been building for a week, rendered in the precise analytical handwriting that made even an impossible proposal look like an inevitable conclusion. I need you there. Because Kazuya trusts you in a way that's different from how he trusts me, she said, with no resentment in it, just the clear-eyed accounting of a strategist reading her available resources. He trusts me because I've saved lives. He trusts you because you caught Goro's fist and didn't break it. She tucked the scroll back. Different kinds of trust, both useful. And Maito, Tsunade's expression softened barely the small amount she allowed herself. She was awake before sunrise. She'd already worked through the second SEAL theory exercise I set her yesterday and written 3 questions about it that I couldn't answer without thinking. A pause. She's going to outgrow what I can teach her faster than I'd like. Is that a problem? No. It means I need to teach her the tools to teach herself, not just the content. She looked down at the camp below them, the morning activity, the smoke from cookfires, the sound of training that had started as soon as the light was good enough. She asked me this morning why I'm teaching her. What did you say? I said because she deserves to know the things she's capable of knowing. She paused. She thought about it for about 10 seconds and then asked if that was the real reason or the answer I was giving her. Another pause. She's 7. Yeah, Naruto said. She's definitely 7. The meeting with Kazuya happened in the clan head's tent, after the evening meal, with 3 of Kazuya's senior advisors present, and a fire that made the shadows jump. Tsunade presented the plateau proposal for 22 minutes without interruption. She covered the terrain advantages, the water access, the defensive geometry, the long-term expansion capacity, the chakra soil richness that would support the training programs she was building. She covered the relocation logistics, the timeline, the resource allocation. She covered the risk assessment, the window of vulnerability during the move, the clans that might view the transition as an opportunity, the mitigation strategies for each. When she finished, the tent was quiet for a moment. Kazuya's lead advisor, an older woman named Sora who had been managing clan logistics for 30 years and had the specific energy of someone who had heard many proposals and approved approximately 4, said, "The move is the risk. If we're caught in transit, we won't be," Naruto said. Sora looked at him. "That's a significant claim. I'll run the transit personally, full coverage every stage of the move." He didn't elaborate on what that meant in practical terms. The Senju leadership had a general picture of his capabilities at this point, enough to know that full coverage meant something categorically different from what a normal warrior escort meant. Nobody touches the convoy. Kazuya had been quiet through all of it. He looked at the map Tsunade had drawn, then at the plateau as though he could see it through the tent wall and the 40 kilometers between them. "How long?" he said. 7 days to reach the plateau, 2 months to build a structure capable of housing and defending the full clan. Tsunade had the numbers ready. 3 months until the new site is more defensible than this one by every metric. "And the Uchiha," Kazura said. Naruto and Tsunade exchanged a glance, a quick one, barely a second, but Kazura's eyes caught it. "A preliminary contact was made this morning," Naruto said. "Their position is cautiously open. A formal meeting has been proposed at the new site in approximately 3 months." He paused. "The response hasn't come back yet, but I expect it will be positive." Kazura looked at him for a long moment, then at Tsunade, then back at the map. "You walked out to meet 40 Uchiha warriors alone," he said to Naruto. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, and came back." "Yes, and the result was a proposed alliance meeting." "Yes." Kazura picked up the map. He held it, looking at the plateau marker, the water lines, the defensive annotations Tsunade had added in her small, precise script. He was thinking with the careful slowness of a man who understood that the decisions made tonight would outlive him, who took that seriously. "Move the clan," he said. "We begin preparation tomorrow." The 3 weeks that followed were the hardest work Naruto had ever done, and simultaneously some of the most unexpectedly satisfying. Logistics at that scale, for a clan that had never attempted a permanent relocation, was a specific kind of chaos. Not violent chaos, but human chaos. The endlessly complicated negotiation of 200 people with 200 different ideas about what needed to happen first and 200 different anxiety responses to the disruption of everything familiar. Naruto ran logistics, not because he was the obvious choice, but because Tsunade assigned it to him with the confidence of someone who had decided the assignment was the right call and wasn't inviting debate. He organized it like a shadow clone network, parallel operations, information flowing continuously between moving parts, adjustment happening in real time as conditions changed. He moved between groups with the tireless efficiency of someone who was running on Kurama-supplemented stamina and had genuinely stopped noticing the absence of sleep as a limiting factor. Mito followed him on the 3rd day, not asked, not assigned. She simply appeared at his elbow at sunrise and matched his pace, watching how he organized things, asking sharp questions whenever he made a decision that wasn't immediately obvious to her. He explained everything. She integrated the explanations in real time, which meant that by the 2nd day she was anticipating the decisions before he made them, and was usually correct. On the 5th day she told him, with the calm certainty of a 7-year-old who had decided something, that she was going to help with the transit planning. "You're 7, he said. "That's not an argument," she said. He gave her 2 tasks. She completed them both accurately before noon. He gave her 3 more. She completed those before sunset. He stopped arguing and gave her a title, Transit Coordinator for Rear Column, which was not a role that had previously existed, and she accepted it with the gravity of a general receiving a battlefield commission. Kurama found this extremely funny. He was quiet about it, which Naruto appreciated. The transit happened on the 7th day. Naruto covered it exactly as he'd promised, running the perimeter continuously, shadow clones placed at every vulnerability point. His sage sensing extended to maximum range and monitoring every chakra signature within a 15-kilometer bubble around the moving column. Nobody touched the convoy. They arrived at the plateau at mid-afternoon, the entire Senju clan. And the moment the lead column cleared the tree line and saw what Naruto's weeks of shadow clone construction had built, the reshaped terrain, the water channels running clean and accessible, the foundation walls that were already 2 meters high, the column stopped. 200 people standing at the plateau's edge, looking at the beginning of something. Kazura stood at the front. He looked at the foundation, at the channels, at the shaped land. He put his hand against the nearest stone wall, and the wall was warm from the afternoon sun and solid. He looked at Naruto. This is really something, he said, in the voice of a man who had more feeling than sentence structure for it. It'll be more, Naruto said. Give it time. Haruto appeared at Naruto's elbow, 9 years old, serious as a tax collector, clutching a piece of charcoal and a wooden board he'd been using to take notes throughout the transit. He looked at the construction and then up at Naruto and said, "The second water channel is running slightly south of the planned angle." Naruto looked. The kid was right. "Good catch," he said. Haruto wrote something on his board. Naruto had no idea what. He made a mental note to find out. Mito appeared on his other side. She'd managed the rear column with a competence that several adults had found unsettling and had decided to interpret as endearing. She looked at the plateau, at the walls, at the sky above them, open and enormous. "Is this going to be a village?" she asked. Naruto looked at Tsunade, who had appeared beside Kazura and was already unrolling the construction schematics, already in conversation, already building. "Something like one," he said. "What's the difference?" He thought about it. About hidden villages and what they were, military organizations with community aesthetics, built for war while pretending to be built for people. "A village is built around the idea that peace is possible," he said. "What we're building is around the idea that it's necessary. That's different." Mito considered this with the full weight of her considerable 7-year-old intellectual gravity. "Okay," she said. "I can work with that." Below them, the Senju clan began to fill the plateau, children running ahead. Adults moving with the careful deliberateness of people who are trying to look like they aren't emotional about something. Older clan members walking slowly, hands trailing against the stone walls, testing the reality of the place. Kit Kurama said, "Yeah, 3 weeks ago you landed in a rice paddy." "Yeah, look at this." Naruto looked. 200 people finding their places in the foundation of something that didn't have a name yet because Tsunade had said you name things when they're finished. Haruto with his charcoal board. Mito with her impossible certainty. Kazura with his hand against the warm stone. And somewhere south, the Uchiha clan reading the message that Ryo had delivered, deciding whether the next 50 years looked like war or something else entirely. "Yeah," Naruto said. "I'm looking." The message from the Uchiha arrived 4 days later, a single hawk, Uchiha clan's seal on the scroll. Naruto brought it to Tsunade. She read it, handed it back. It was not a declaration of war. It was a question, written in old Uchiha script, in a handwriting Naruto recognized as Ryo's from their conversation, careful and precise, the hand of someone who thought before they wrote. "What do you want?" Naruto read it twice. Then he sat down, pulled out a blank scroll, dipped a brush, and wrote back to make sure the question, "What do you want?" is one our grandchildren can still afford to ask. He sealed it, gave it to the hawk. The hawk flew south. "Good answer," Kurama said. "Was it too poetic for an Uchiha?" "No." A pause. "Possibly for you." Naruto looked at the hawk until it disappeared against the sky, carrying 30 words south toward a decision that would shape the next century. Then he rolled up his sleeves and went back to building. End of Chapter 3. So take sip of water before going to Chapter 4, roots deep enough to weather war. The first thing Haruto grew was a branch, not metaphorically. An actual branch, 20 centimeters of living wood erupting from his palm on a cold morning in the plateau's training yard, green and real and trembling slightly, the way new things tremble when they've just figured out they exist. It lasted 11 seconds before his chakra control slipped, and it receded back into his skin, leaving nothing but a faint green tinge on his palm and the smell of fresh wood in the cold air. He stared at his hand. Then he looked at Tsunade, who was crouched in front of him with her diagnostic chakra already reading every pathway involved, her expression doing the specific thing it did when reality confirmed a calculation she'd spent months building toward. "Again," she said. "I don't know how I—" "You do know, your body knows. Stop thinking about the how and just do it again." Haruto looked at his hand. He breathed the way she'd taught him, deep and specific, chakra pulled from the gut rather than the chest, directed down the arm with intention rather than force. His brow furrowed. The temperature around his palm dropped slightly. The branch came back. 25 centimeters this time. It held for 19 seconds. Tsunade sat back on her heels. She was quiet for a moment, the quiet of someone processing something significant and choosing to process it privately before putting any of it into words. "Good," she said. Her voice was even, measured. "Take the rest of the morning, eat something. We'll work on sustained duration this afternoon." Naruto nodded. He was looking at his palm again, turning it over, studying it with the methodical attention he brought to everything. "Is this what my grandfather's grandfather could do?" he asked. Not the grandfather he knew, the one 3 or 4 steps back, the ones whose stories had grown into clan mythology by the time they reached his generation. "It's the beginning of it," Tsunade said. "What you just did is the seed. What it becomes depends on how much work you put into it." She paused. "A lot of work, I want to be clear about that. Years of it." "Okay," Naruto said, with the complete equanimity of a 10-year-old who had been training since before he could reliably write his own name and considered years of work a normal quantity of work. He walked off toward the meal hall. Tsunade stayed where she was, crouched in the training yard, looking at the space where the branch had been. She stayed like that for a while. Naruto found her 20 minutes later. He'd been running the morning perimeter check. A habit now, systematic and efficient, sage sensing sweeping the full coverage radius while his body did the physical circuit of the plateau walls. He came back through the training yard and found her still there, upright now but not moving. He didn't say anything. He sat on the training yard fence and waited. 11 seconds, she said eventually. "I know, I felt it from the east wall." The wood release had a specific signature in nature energy, a surge, warm and growing like a plant accelerating through a time lapse. "Naruto?" "Yes." "First time?" "Yes." She turned around. Her eyes were dry, had been dry throughout, he was certain. She'd been alone out here for 20 minutes and her eyes were dry. "He's 10 years old, Naruto. He just produced wood release, first generation, deliberate cultivation." She looked at her own hands, the healer's hands, the builder's hands, the hands of someone who had been working toward this specific moment for 4 months. "In our timeline it was called a miracle, unrepeatable, divine inheritance." Her voice was even. "It wasn't, it was just nobody trying." "You tried," Naruto said. "I had the knowledge," she said. "That's not the same as trying. Trying is," she gestured at the training yard. At the plateau around them, the walls, the buildings going up, the 240 people who were now Senju clan residents, 40 more than had made the transit. "This is trying." She put her hands down. "He's going to be extraordinary." "Yeah," Naruto said. "He already is." She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "He corrected my water channel calculation last week, the 43-degree angle issue. I had it at 41 and he pointed out the gradient compensation error." She shook her head. 10 years old. "He's learned from watching you," Naruto said. "Which means he learned that precision matters and being right matters more than being polite about being right." "Terrifying," she said, but she said it like a compliment. The plateau had a name now, despite Tsunade's rule. It had happened organically, the way names happen in communities, not by declaration but by repetition until the repetition became fact. The Senju clan had started calling it Najidai, the calm platform, which Tsunade had accepted with the grudging acknowledgement of someone who recognized that you can name things when they're finished, or you can watch the people living in them name things for you. Najidai was, by the 4th month, no longer a construction project. It was a place. The outer walls were complete, 3 meters high, a meter thick, built from the plateau's own stone with chakra compression techniques that made the rock stronger than its natural state. The water channels ran clean and reliable to every building cluster. The medical wing occupied the most protected interior space, flanked by the training yards and the clan hall. Residential quarters climbed the rock face in tiers, connected by wooden staircases that Naruto had built with shadow clones in an afternoon, and Naruto had immediately identified 3 structural improvements for. There were gardens. That was the thing that caught Naruto off guard every time he came back from a perimeter run, the gardens. Tsunade had started them as a medical supply initiative, practical plants for practical purposes. But the clan had kept going, adding things that had no strategic value whatsoever. Flowers, decorative stones, a tree that one of the older Uzumaki women had carried as a seedling from the old enclave and planted in the courtyard's center without asking anyone's permission. Nobody told her to remove it. The tree was already 2 meters tall. Would release adjacent soil, Naruto suspected, combined with Kurama's passive nature energy enrichment, which he'd been running continuously at low output for months. Everything on the plateau grew slightly faster than it should. Nobody had commented on it explicitly, but the clan's farmers had noticed and adapted, adjusting their harvest timing with the practical efficiency of people who didn't need an explanation for a good thing. He thought about that sometimes. How much of building something good was just making the conditions for good things and then getting out of the way. Mito's education had long since stopped looking like education and started looking like a collaboration between two people who were both learning, just at different rates and from different directions. She was 8 now. She'd had her birthday in the 3rd month at Najidai, which she'd marked by completing a ceiling array that Tsunade had set as a theoretical exercise. Not a practical assignment, just a framework problem, something to think about. Mito had thought about it for 2 days, and then presented a completed, functional seal with 3 theoretical variations and a written analysis of their comparative efficiency. Tsunade had read it twice. Then she'd redesigned Mito's entire curriculum. The containment work is beyond what I'd expect from a student of any age, Tsunade told Naruto one evening. In the private tone she used for assessments, she wasn't sharing with the broader clan. But it's the theoretical integration that's remarkable. She doesn't just apply principles, she extends them. She finds the implication that's one step past where I've pointed, and she goes there without being told. Is that a problem? Naruto asked. It means I need to stop teaching her specific techniques and start teaching her the underlying theory of the entire sealing tradition. Which is, a pause. Which is work I'd need to do anyway for the clan's long-term archival capacity. She's just accelerating the timeline. Tsunade looked across the courtyard to where Mito was sitting under the Uzumaki tree, cross-legged, 3 scrolls open around her and a brush moving steadily across a 4th. She came to me this morning with a question about chakra seal integration that I didn't have an answer for. You didn't? I have never not had an answer for a student's question, Tsunade said. Not with ego, with the specific discomfort of someone encountering a new experience at a point in their life where new experiences are rare. She asked about the theoretical limit of Fuinjutsu applied to living chakra networks, whether a seal could be designed to integrate with a host's chakra permanently rather than sitting on top of it. I told her the existing theory said no. She paused. She said she thought the existing theory was wrong and asked if we could test it. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Is the existing theory wrong? He asked. Tsunade looked at him. Probably, she said. I've been thinking about it for 3 days. Across the courtyard, Mito turned a page, made a note, turned another page. She had the focused stillness of someone who was completely inside whatever she was working on, the rest of the world reduced to a background condition. She's going to figure out the Jinchuriki sealing system, Naruto said. He kept his voice neutral. Eventually, on her own. Probably, Tsunade said again, before or after she figures out its limitations. Before, Tsunade said. Definitely before. They looked at Mito under her tree for a moment. 8 years old, surrounded by scrolls, working on problems that the next century of shinobi history would spend generations trying to solve. Not knowing that, just working, she's going to be something, Kurama said quietly in the space he occupied in Naruto's mind. Yeah, different from what I expected. Not a container, a builder like Tsunade, like both of you, Kurama said, the specific kind of person who sees a problem and can't stop until they've resolved it at the root rather than the surface. A pause. Your era needed more of them. This one's going to have them, Naruto said. The medical corps had 38 members by the end of month 4. Tsunade had built it in the way she built everything, systematically, with clear standards, without sentimentality about the process. Entry was merit-based, training was rigorous. The curriculum ran from basic wound management up through advanced diagnostic techniques, with the explicit acknowledgement that nobody would reach the top tier for years. And that was fine because the goal was the institution, not the individual. What she hadn't anticipated, and what she'd adapted to with the flexibility of someone who knew good surprises when she saw them, was the composition. 60% of the medical corps were women. In an era where women in clans occupied roles that were determined almost entirely by the clan's immediate combat needs. Fighters when there were enough men, support when there weren't, authority almost never. The medical corps had become the first formal power structure in Najadai where competence was the only entry requirement. Women who had been managing clan health informally for decades, without title or authority, suddenly had both. They were better at it than most of the men who'd applied, and they knew it, and the corps knew it. And after the first month, Tsunade had simply let the institutional culture sort itself out. Sora, Kazura's logistics advisor, the woman who had approved approximately 4 proposals in 30 years, had joined the medical corps in month 2. She was 51 years old, had never had formal medical training, and had picked up intermediate diagnostic technique in 6 weeks. Tsunade had stopped being surprised by this and started being interested in what it implied about latent capability in a population that had never had access to formal training. How many people in this clan could be doing things they have no idea they're capable of? She asked Naruto one evening over the bark tea that was slowly becoming less terrible as the plateau gardens produced better alternatives. All of them, Naruto said. That's not a useful answer. It's the true one. He leaned back against the wall. In my era in Konoha, the whole system was built on sorting, identifying who was worth investing in and putting resources into those people. Everyone else got basic training and a position. He looked at the ceiling. The sorting happened at 12. What kind of sense does that make? You're 12 years old and someone decides whether you're worth developing. The academy system, Tsunade said, right, and everyone who didn't make it through, everyone who was sorted out, he made a gesture. They existed, in the village, but outside the investment structure. He looked at her. You're not doing that here. I'm doing the opposite of that, she said, deliberately. She pulled out the scroll she'd been working on for 3 weeks, the legal framework document, the one she'd started as an operational necessity, and that had grown, draft by draft, into something more ambitious. I've been writing the foundations for how this clan governs itself long-term. Not just military structure, everything. Succession, resource allocation, training access, medical rights. She unrolled a section. The core principle is that clan investment in an individual is not conditional on early assessment of potential. Every child gets the full curriculum. Specialization happens by choice and demonstrated affinity, not by external sorting. Naruto read the section she was pointing to. It was dense, legal language wasn't his native form, but the meaning was clear. Kazura's going to read this, he said. Kazura's going to sign this, she said. I've been briefing him section by section for 2 months. He understands the practical implications, and he agrees with them. A pause. He had a daughter who was identified as not combat suitable at age 9 and spent 30 years doing logistics support without a title. He has opinions about sorting. Is that why Sora? Yes, Tsunade said. That's why Sora. The daimyo's envoy arrived on a Tuesday. Nobody in the Warring States period called it Tuesday. The day naming systems were different. But Naruto had been keeping his own calendar in the private shorthand he used for personal record keeping, and it was Tuesday. And he noted it because the arrival felt like the kind of moment that should be time-stamped. The envoy was a man named Akiro, middle-aged, dressed in the layered formal robes of Fire Country daimyo administration. Silk and ceremony, completely impractical, designed to communicate that the person wearing it didn't need to be practical, because he had other people for that. He arrived with 8 guards and an air of carefully managed condescension that Naruto recognized as the specific performance of someone who was more impressed than they wanted to appear. Najidai had been visible from the river road for a month now. The walls, the water channels, the smoke from the meal hall fires. 3 months ago it had been an empty plateau. Now it was a functional settlement of 260 people, expanding, organized, with a medical facility that neighboring communities had been quietly sending their sick to for 6 weeks. Those communities paid for the medical care, not always in coin. The era's economy was complicated and barter-heavy, but in resources, labor, information, political goodwill. Tsunade had been systematic about it. Not transactional in a way that felt mercenary, but clear-eyed about the reality that a medical institution that couldn't sustain itself couldn't sustain anyone else. The blood debts she'd accumulated across the surrounding region were real, and the daimyo's administration had noticed. Ikiro was in the clan hall for 40 minutes. Tsunade ran the meeting. Naruto sat at the table and said almost nothing, which was exactly the role she'd briefed him on before the meeting: present, credible, available if needed, not dominating. Kazura sat at the head of the table as clan head, which was correct protocol, but anyone in the room could see within 10 minutes that the strategic intelligence was coming from Tsunade's side of the table. The envoy's position. The daimyo wanted to understand what Najidai was, and what its intentions were relative to Fire Country's political structure. Tsunade's position. Najidai was a sovereign clan territory with independent governance, medical facilities open to all of Fire Country, and no territorial ambitions beyond their current plateau. They sought formal recognition as an independent political entity, not subordination to the daimyo structure. The envoy's concern. An independent armed settlement with this level of organization was a destabilizing element. Tsunade's counter. A medical institution that had saved 47 lives in the surrounding region in 6 weeks, operated by a clan with a demonstrated interest in regional stability, was a stabilizing element. She had the numbers. She put them on the table. Ikiro looked at the numbers. He looked at Tsunade. He looked at Naruto, who was sitting quietly in a way that somehow communicated more than whatever he might have said. Then he looked at the numbers again. "The daimyo will want a formal proposal," he said. "I have one prepared," Tsunade said, and produced it from her sleeve. Ikiro left with the proposal, his 8 guards, and the expression of a man who had come to assess a potential threat and was going home to report something significantly more complicated. After he was gone, Kazura looked at Tsunade across the table. "You wrote that proposal 3 weeks ago?" He said. 4, she said. "You knew he was coming." "I knew someone was coming. The only question was whether it was an envoy or a military patrol." She rolled the backup copy of the proposal back into its scroll. "An envoy means the daimyo is curious. A military patrol means he's afraid. Curious is manageable." A pause. "We'll have a response within 3 weeks. It'll be positive because the numbers are the numbers." Kazura was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was 25, I thought strength was the only real political currency." "Strength is the guarantee," Tsunade said. "It's what makes everything else credible, but it's not the currency." She put the scroll away. "Medicine is the currency because everybody gets sick, everybody gets hurt, and everybody, regardless of clan or politics, wants the person treating them to be the best available." She looked at him. "We're the best available." Kazura nodded slowly. "My daughter," he said. He hadn't brought her up before in any direct way. Naruto had heard the reference through Sora, but Kazura himself kept it banked. "The one in logistics. She's applied to the medical corps." "I know," Tsunade said. "Her application was strong. She starts next week." Something crossed Kazura's face, not sentiment exactly, but the thing that happens when a man who has made his peace with the shape of the world discovers the shape was temporary. "Good," he said. "And let it be good without needing to make it more than that." The training curriculum was Naruto's project, and it was the work he was proudest of. not the walls. Walls were necessary, but they were walls. Not the political maneuvering that was Tsunade's genius. He was learning to assist it, but he didn't fool himself about where the intelligence was. The training system was his. He'd started with what he knew, the shadow clone method, which in the modern era had been the secret that let him compress years of training into weeks. But shadow clones alone were a tool, not a system. What he was building was the architecture around the tool, the sequence of learning, the developmental stages, the method of matching individual chakra nature to training approach from as early as possible. Elemental affinity diagnosis at age 5. In the modern era, genin didn't discover their primary affinity until academy graduation at age 12. 12 years of chakra development in a direction that might be partially or completely misaligned with their natural tendency. The inefficiency of it was staggering when Naruto laid it out in the framework he was building. 12 years of developing habits that then needed to be partially unlearned. Diagnosis at 5 meant that a child who was naturally wind affinity started building wind-aligned chakra pathways from the beginning. By 12, the age they would have been discovering their affinity in the old system, they had 7 years of correctly oriented development. The gap between a modern-era academy graduate and a Najidai-trained 12-year-old with equivalent chakra volume was substantial. He didn't write textbooks. He'd thought about it. The shadow clone mass production method made it technically feasible, but books were a partial solution to a problem that needed a full one. He trained teachers, people who understood the curriculum well enough to adapt it in real time, who could recognize when a student needed a different approach and had the flexibility to provide it. The teachers trained more teachers. The methodology propagated outward through human transmission, which was slower than books but sturdier. Haruto was one of his teachers. Naruto had started using him for peer instruction with the younger children in month 3. Initially just to keep him engaged while Tsunade's would-release work progressed. But Haruto turned out to be a natural teacher. The same precision that made him correct Naruto's water channel calculations made him exceptional at identifying exactly where a student's understanding broke down and addressing precisely that point. He was 10 years old, and he was teaching 8-year-olds. And the 8-year-olds were learning faster than their cohort in the modern era would have at any point in their academy years. Naruto watched one of Haruto's sessions and came away with the specific feeling of watching something work the way it was supposed to work, which was one of the rarer feelings available. He's going to lead the training program eventually, Naruto told Tsunade. He's already leading it, she said. You're just still co-signing. Black Zetsu moved in the shadows of things Naruto couldn't fully see, and that was the part that kept him up. He had the pattern from their future knowledge, the Kaguya consolidation in the south. The two clean strategic coordination that no organic clan leadership could maintain across multiple simultaneous fronts. He'd shared the pattern with Ryo in their first meeting, and Ryo had confirmed that the Uchiha had noticed the anomaly without being able to name it. He'd been tracking it since. Month 4, the tracking produced its first concrete data point. A clan called the Natsuki, small, river-based, 30 people at most, dissolved completely over 8 days. Not defeated in battle. Simply gone. The pattern of their disappearance was wrong, too clean, too coordinated, the specific geometry of something that had been organized rather than happened. Naruto's extended sage, sensing in their territory, afterward picked up a chakra residue that was familiar in the worst possible way. Not human. Not precisely inhuman either. The specific signature of something that had been alive for so long that the categories of alive and not alive had stopped being relevant to it. He'd felt that signature before, in a different century, over a much shorter interaction. He knew what it meant. He told Tsunade that night. She didn't look surprised. She looked the way she looked when a diagnosis confirmed what she'd already suspected, not relieved, because confirmation of a serious problem was never relief, but resolved. "Ready? How far from our territory?" she asked. 60 kilometers south, moving north at the pace of the Kaguya expansion. He paused. He's behind the Kaguya consolidation, driving it. 40% territorial growth in 4 months isn't organic, it's directed. He's using them as a tool. To do what? Create conflict at scale. Maximum casualties on maximum sides. He looked at the fire. Same as always, the worse the world gets, the more appealing the idea of a divine ruler becomes to the people suffering in it. He's not trying to build an army, he's trying to build a need. Tsunade was quiet, thinking through the implications. We counter it at the source. She said, "Not the Kaguya, they're just the vehicle. We disrupt the organizational structure he's built inside them." She looked at her intelligence scroll, the network of contacts and information sources she'd been building across the region since month 1 through the medical core external work. "I have 3 information nodes inside Kaguya adjacent territory. Give me 2 weeks. And then we find where he's physically operating from, and we go there." She met his eyes. "The 2 of us, not a clan operation. The clan doesn't need to know yet. Too much information about this particular threat, shared too broadly, creates panic that he can use." Naruto nodded. 2 weeks. He looked at the fire. "You knew he was here," Kurama said. "I knew he was somewhere," Naruto said. Here is the same as everywhere. He's always been everywhere. You're not afraid. I'm not afraid. We've done this before. The version of you that did this before had resources you don't have here. I have different ones." "Yes," Kurama said, with something that in a human would have been warmth and in a fox was whatever the fox equivalent was, which Naruto had decided was the same thing wearing different clothing. "You do." The alliance meeting with the Uchiha happened in month 5, and it almost went perfectly. Ryo arrived with 8 representatives, a formal delegation, the number that Uchiha protocol designated for a meeting of significance without being a meeting of submission. They came to Najidai for the first time, entering through the main gate, and Naruto watched the representatives take in the walls and the training yards and the medical wing and the courtyard tree, and do the specific recalculation that people did when the reality in front of them was larger than the report they'd been given. Kazura received them in the clan hall. Tsunade sat at the table. Naruto sat at the table. Mito was not at the table. She was 8 years old, but Naruto had a specific awareness of where she was during the meeting, which was sitting outside the clan hall's east window doing the thing where she appeared to be studying a scroll and was actually listening to everything. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Most of it was the careful, face-preserving negotiation of 2 clans who had been enemies for long enough that even wanting to not be enemies required extensive diplomatic ceremony. Naruto let Tsunade and Kazura run most of it and intervened twice. Once to clarify a point about the medical corps external access policy that one of the Uchiha representatives had misread as a territorial expansion tactic, and once to answer a direct question from Ryo about what Najidai's military posture would be if a third party attacked Uchiha territory. "The same as if they attacked ours," Naruto said. The representative who'd misread the medical policy said, "That's a significant commitment." "Yes," Naruto said. "What do you want in exchange?" Naruto looked at him. "The same." The room was quiet for a moment. Ryo, across the table, was doing the thing where he appeared to be reading his own teacup and was actually reading Naruto. "An equal commitment," he said. "An equal commitment," Naruto confirmed. Ryo looked at Tsunade. "You agree to these terms?" "I wrote them," Tsunade said. Another moment of quiet. The 8 Uchiha representatives doing the silent clan internal communication that happened through shared glances in delegations. Not Sharingan, just the shorthand of people who knew each other well enough to have full conversations in micro-expressions. Then Ryo said, "We agree in principle. The formal treaty will need to be drafted and reviewed by both clan councils." "Naturally," Tsunade said. She produced a draft from her sleeve. Ryo took it. "Read the first page." His expression did the thing Naruto was getting familiar with, the small recalibration, the update to his model of what he was dealing with. "You drafted this before the meeting." 3 weeks before, Tsunade said, confident. Prepared, she said. There's a difference. Ryo was quiet for a moment, then, unexpectedly, he almost smiled. My clan head said you'd be dangerous, he said. He meant it as a warning. I think he underspecified. Your clan head is perceptive, Tsunade said. Tell him I said so. The almost smile became something slightly more real. It was after the delegation left, after the formalities were complete, and the Uchiha representatives were moving back through Najidai's gate, that Ryo stopped, not to look at the walls or the training yards. He stopped in the courtyard, in front of the Uzumaki tree that had been planted without permission and had grown, in 5 months of Kurama-enriched soil, to nearly 3 meters, and was developing the particular quality of something that intended to be here permanently. He looked at the tree for a moment, then he looked at Naruto, who had followed him out. My clan head is dying, he said, not as the formal alliance representative, just as himself, quiet and direct in the way he was when the ceremony was off. He has maybe 2 months. I know, Naruto said. I'm sorry. Don't be, he's lived well, he's ready. Ryo looked back at the tree. When he goes, the succession is contested. There's a faction that sees this alliance as weakness, as submission. He paused. They're not small. How not small? Perhaps a third of the clan's fighting strength? Naruto let that sit. A third was enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be inevitable. What do they want? What they've always wanted. Dominance. The Senju as subordinates or enemies. The old structure. Ryo turned to look at him directly. I want you to know about this before it becomes your problem, because it will. It doesn't have to, Naruto said. It will anyway. That's how these things work. Ryo looked at the tree one more time. I'll manage it, but I wanted you to know. Naruto looked at him, at the 19-year-old who was already carrying the weight of his clan's next century. Ryo, when it happens, the succession, you have allies here. That's real. Use it. Ryo was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. And then, with the complete sincerity of someone who didn't say things they didn't mean. Thank you for what you're building here, regardless of how the succession goes. What you're building here is, he searched for the word, didn't quite find one. It matters. He left. Naruto stood in the courtyard with the tree. He's going to be good, Kurama said. Yeah, it's going to cost him. Yeah, Naruto said. I know. He put his hand against the tree's bark, warm from the afternoon sun. Solid in the way that things become solid when they've decided to stay. Above him, on the wall, Haruto was running a training session with a group of 8-year-olds. Their chakra signatures, small and distinct and getting cleaner every week, moved through the exercises Naruto had designed with the specific slightly wrong but improving quality of people who are learning something real. Below the east window, Maito was still reading her scroll. She'd have questions for Tsunade tonight. She always had questions for Tsunade. The questions were getting harder, and Tsunade was getting genuinely excited about that in the careful way she had of being genuinely excited about things, which was to say you had to watch closely to see it. And inside the clan hall, Tsunade and Kazura were reviewing the treaty draft, section by section, and Sora was taking notes, and the fire in the hall was burning. And 260 people were living their lives in the thing they'd built, in the place that hadn't existed 5 months ago, in a world that was just barely beginning to bend in a different direction. Naruto breathed in, breathed out. The branch that Haruto had grown this morning was gone now, reabsorbed, temporary 11 seconds of something that was going to be the rest of everything. But it had been real. That was always how it started. End of Chapter 4, and at Chapter 5, the shadow beneath history. The thing about Black Zetsu was that he didn't feel like evil. Evil, in Naruto's experience, had a signature. It had weight and heat, and the specific chakra texture of something that had chosen darkness and kept choosing it until the choice became the thing itself. Madara felt like that. Obito, at his worst, felt like that. Even pain beneath the ideology had the burning quality of someone in permanent grief that had curdled into something terrible. Black Zetsu felt like nothing, not absence, not the cold of someone who'd hollowed themselves out, something older than that. the specific quality of something that had existed for so long that human categories like evil and good had stopped being relevant to it. The way water doesn't think about whether it's drowning you or keeping you alive. It simply moves according to its nature, and its nature has been the same since before anyone alive could remember. Naruto felt this the moment Tsunade's intelligence network delivered the location and he stood outside the Kaguya-adjacent settlement at the southern border of their range and extended his sage, sensing into it. "There," Kurama said immediately, "I feel it. Be careful. He already knows we're here." That was the other thing about Black Zetsu. He was always already aware. The advantage of existing for centuries was that surprise stopped being a vulnerability because nothing surprised you anymore. Naruto had known this going in. He'd planned for it. He and Tsunade had left Najidai 2 days ago, moving south under chakra suppression, dressed as civilian travelers, which worked better than it should have because the era's surveillance infrastructure was nothing compared to what they were used to. And because Tsunade in civilian clothes and a bad mood looked like someone you didn't ask questions of. The settlement was a trading post. 30 structures, maybe 100 people, the kind of place that existed in the Warring States period as a necessary neutral zone. Everyone needed to trade, even people who were trying to kill each other. And settlements like this one operated under an informal mutual interest protection that was more reliable than any treaty. The Kaguya had a significant presence here. That presence had grown over the last 3 months in the way that Black Zetsu's influence always grew. Not loudly, not visibly, just a gradual thickening of control around the structural points until the structure was no longer its own. They found him in the back room of a grain merchant's building. Not him exactly, his current host, which was a man of about 40 with the specific blankness of expression that Naruto recognized as what happened when something else had been running the controls for long enough that the original occupant had receded. The body was fine. Healthy, even. Black Zetsu kept his tools in good condition. Tsunade had the room sealed before the door fully opened. A containment barrier, one of her own design, drawing on the ceiling theory she'd been developing for 4 months, and that Mito's questions had pushed significantly further than it would otherwise have gone. It went up in under a second, invisible to any sense that wasn't chakra diagnostic. The man looked up from the table where he'd been reading reports. "You sealed the room," he said. His voice was wrong, not inhuman, but off in the specific way that indicated the voice box was being used by something that didn't entirely understand the social conventions of intonation. "That was faster than I expected." "Sit down," Tsunade said. "I'm already sitting," he said. "Though I appreciate the authority." He set down the report. "Naruto Uzumaki and the Senju granddaughter." He looked at them with the man's eyes, which had the quality of windows rather than eyes, something looking out through them rather than from them. "You've been busy." "You've been busier," Naruto said. He stayed near the door. Not because he needed the exit. The containment barrier meant nothing was getting out of this room without Tsunade releasing it. But because standing near the door kept his attention from narrowing to the figure at the table, which was a trap Black Zetsu had been setting for opponents since before the hidden villages existed. The Kaguya expansion, the Natsuki dissolution, the manipulation of the River Clan treaties. He tilted his head. "You've been running strategy for 4 months, since before we arrived." "Since significantly before you arrived," Zetsu said, without embarrassment. He said it the way you state a fact that has no moral content, a date, a distance, a quantity. "I've been working in this region for considerably longer than 4 months. You've disrupted perhaps 18 months of preparation. That's," a pause that might have been assessment, "genuinely impressive. I want you to know I mean that." "I don't want you to mean that," Naruto said, regardless. Tsunade moved to the side of the room, her position complementing Naruto's. She'd run the geometry before they entered, 2 points of control, neither of them in a line that could be addressed simultaneously. Her hands were at her sides, not raised, but her strength of 100 seal was burning at full charge beneath the surface of her forehead, ready, What is the current operational goal? She asked, direct and clinical. The voice she used for diagnosis she expected to be serious. The same as it has always been, Zetsu said. My mother's resurrection, the return of the divine order that preceded the chakra era's corrupted version of her gift. He looked at Tsunade with the head tilt of something genuinely curious about the response it was going to get. You already knew that. You're from the future, you know everything I am. We know what you did in ours, Naruto said. We know the playbook. Then you know I succeed, Zetsu said pleasantly. Or you know I succeeded, past tense from your perspective, the timeline you're from. He laced the host's fingers together on the table. Which no longer exists, which creates an interesting philosophical problem. If the timeline in which I succeed is gone, do I still succeed? Or does the disappearance of that timeline mean I fail? A pause. I've been thinking about this since you arrived. I don't have a complete answer. Here's one, Naruto said. You don't succeed because we're here. That's not an answer, Zetsu said. That's an intention. Intentions and outcomes are different things, you know that? You've been learning it since you got here. He looked at Naruto with the specific quality of something that had watched enough human beings to understand them without being one. You intended to fix your timeline. You ended up building a new one. The outcome wasn't the intention. It was better, arguably, but it wasn't the intention. The room was quiet for a moment. Naruto didn't say anything because there was nothing to say to that wouldn't give something away. The observation was accurate. He'd made peace with it mostly, but accurate was accurate. I'll make you an offer, Zetsu said. No, Tsunade said immediately. You haven't heard it. I don't need to. She stepped closer to the table, not close enough to be within reach, but close enough to remove any ambiguity about her position in the room. Whatever you're offering costs us something we won't pay. That's how your offers work. They're constructed so the refusal is also a concession. She looked at him with the direct, unimpressed gaze of someone who had spent a life reading people and was applying the same skill to something that wasn't quite a person. I've seen the outcome of accepting your frameworks. I'm not interested. Zetsu looked at her for a moment. The granddaughter? He said, and there was something in how he said it, not threat, but a kind of recognition that was worse than threat. You're the most dangerous thing in this room, not him. He glanced at Naruto. He's powerful. Power is manageable. You're building systems. Systems outlast power. Systems compound. The host's head tilted. The medical core, the training curriculum, the legal framework you've been writing, the genetic cultivation program. He said it all without inflection, each item a data point in a picture he'd been assembling. You're not trying to win a war. You're trying to make war structurally irrational. That's, another pause, considerably harder to counter than an army. Good, Tsunade said. It won't be enough, he said. Not by itself. You know what I am. You know how long I've been operating. You know that I can wait out systems. I've waited out dynasties, philosophies, entire civilizations. Whatever you build, I will still be here when it shows its first crack. Then we build something that doesn't crack, Naruto said. Everything cracks. Not if you keep fixing it, Naruto said. That's the thing you've never understood. You think in dynasties, in monolithic structures. One plan, one outcome, one divine ruler. That's your whole framework. He looked at the host's blank eyes. We're not building a dynasty, we're building a habit. People who fix things when they break. People who look at a crack and reach for tools instead of giving up. He stepped away from the door, fully into the room, and the amber warmth of Kurama's chakra moved through him like a tide, not threatening, just present, just real. You can wait out anything that depends on being perfect. You can't wait out something that knows how to recover. Zetsu was quiet. In the long history of his existence, Naruto suspected, he had not been quiet very often because something surprised him. He was quiet now with the quality of something that had received new information and was genuinely processing it. Withdraw, Tsunade said. From the Kaguya structure, from the southern settlements, from this region. She held his gaze. Not because you're afraid of us. Because you're intelligent enough to know that the thing you've been building here for 18 months has been compromised at every structural point and continuing is waste. You'll need to start over anyway. Do it somewhere else. And if I don't, then I expose you, she said. Not to the Senju or the Uchiha, to everyone. Every clan head in Fire Country, Earth Country, Wind Country. I write a comprehensive account of what you are, what you do, how you operate, how to detect your presence and counter your methods, and I distribute it through the medical core network that now touches every significant population center within 100 kilometers. She let that sit. You've spent centuries operating in the dark. I'll turn on every light I can find. The host's face did something that wasn't quite an expression, more the echo of one, the face trying to respond to something the occupant was feeling without the occupant being in a position to feel things cleanly. You can't document what you don't fully understand, he said. I understand enough, she said. And I'll understand more, I have time. A pause. Do you want to test how much I can learn in the next 6 months? Another silence, longer this time. Naruto felt it in the chakra of the room. The sealed space had its own pressure, and within that pressure, the specific quality of something calculating. Running scenarios. The centuries-long patience of a thing that thought in generations, doing rapid short-term assessment, which it was less practiced at. I'll withdraw from this region, Zetsu said finally. The host's voice was flat. Not concession, tactical repositioning, stated plainly. The Kaguya consolidation will collapse without my coordination. You'll need to manage the resulting instability. We'll manage it, Naruto said. I'm not withdrawing permanently, Zetsu said. I want to be clear, I'm repositioning. The goal remains. I know, Naruto said. So does ours. The host stood. His body moved toward the door, and Tsunade released the containment barrier as he reached it, not because she was finished, but because keeping him sealed served no additional purpose, and she'd already made that calculation. He stopped at the threshold. The girl, he said. Not a threat, almost something like acknowledgement. The Uzumaki child, the one working on living chakra network integration. He didn't turn around. She's going to figure it out eventually, what she's working toward. A pause. When she does, the implications are going to be larger than either of you have prepared for. Then he walked out and the host's chakra moved south, and after 40 meters it stopped being a host and started being a man again, confused with a gap in his memory and a headache he'd have for a week, but alive and otherwise unharmed. Naruto and Tsunade stood in the empty room. He's not gone. Naruto said. No, Tsunade agreed, but he's not here either. She looked at her hands, still post-confrontation, the specific stillness of someone who had been holding a lot very tightly and was now permitted to set it down carefully. We bought time. How much? Enough. She turned toward the door. We need to move. The Kaguya consolidation is going to destabilize within a week without his coordination. The southern clans are going to start responding to each other without his management, and it's going to get messy. She was already planning the next 5 moves laid out in her mind before she'd finished the current one. And we need to get back before. Her head came up. Naruto felt it at the same moment through his sage sensing north, toward Najidai. Not a threat to the settlement itself, but a chakra signature he recognized, undergoing a change that he'd been dreading since the alliance meeting. The specific quality of a Sharingan awakening a new form. The grief-forged, loss-born, permanent and terrible flowering of a Mangekyo. Ryo, he said. They were already moving. They arrived at the edge of Uchiha territory in 6 hours. Travel that should have taken 2 days, accomplished at a pace that left the landscape behind them as a blur and the natural energy of the region rippling in their wake like a boat's wake in water. What they found was the aftermath of something that had already ended. The succession duel had happened in the Uchiha clan's central grounds, a formal space, stone-floored, open to the sky. The formality of it was important. This wasn't a battle, it was a process. The old clan head was gone, dead of illness 3 days before Naruto and Tsunade had left for the south. And the succession contest had moved faster than anyone had predicted. The hardline faction had fielded their strongest candidate, a man named Kota, 35 years old, Sharingan fully realized, with the political support of approximately 30% of the clan and the combat capability to make that political support matter. He had challenged Ryo formally, which under Uchiha succession law meant the challenge had to be answered. Ryo had answered it. The fight had lasted 11 minutes by the account of the 3 witnesses who described it to Naruto later. Ryo had gone into it with his standard Sharingan, superior speed and tactical intelligence, but Kota was experienced and committed and had the specific dangerous quality of someone who believed completely in what they were fighting for. At minute 7, Kota had managed a technique, a clan-specific genjutsu old and deep that caught Ryo in a loop. Not full capture. A partial lock, the kind that slowed response time by half a second was enough. Kota's blade had caught Ryo across the left forearm, not disabling, not lethal, but real. And in the moment of that hit, something had happened that changed everything. The person standing next to Ryo, his second, his oldest friend, a young man named Kenji who had been his training partner since they were 6 years old, had moved to intervene. Had stepped forward instinctively without thought, the way people who love someone move when that someone is in danger. Kota had redirected to Kenji. In the space of a formal succession duel, that redirect was illegal, grounds for immediate disqualification. But illegal and done were not the same thing, and by the time the witnesses processed the redirect, Kenji was on the ground. Ryo had looked at Kenji on the ground, and the Mangekyo had come, not like a sunrise, like a detonation. The witnesses described the feeling as a pressure wave, the air going thick, the stone under their feet vibrating once. Ryo's eyes had become something else, the Sharingan evolving in the specific terrible bloom that only happened when the person bearing it experienced a loss that went beyond what the ordinary eye could process. Kota had been the best Uchiha fighter of his generation. The fight ended in 40 seconds after that. Nobody was dead except Kenji, who had been gone before the Mangekyo opened. And Kota, who had been placed on the ground carefully and without additional harm. The 40 seconds hadn't been about hurting him. They'd been about ending it. And Ryo had ended it with the grim precision of someone who had just learned something terrible about what they were capable of, and was choosing, in the immediate aftermath, to be controlled about it. Ryo was clan head. The hardline faction was leaderless and outmatched, and, in the way of Uchiha politics, rapidly recalculating their position. Naruto found him alone in the witness hall after the formal proceedings were concluded. Sitting on the stone floor, which was the Uchiha version of sitting on the rock face, the unguarded posture you only took when you decided you were done performing composure for the evening. His eyes were back to standard Sharingan. The Mangekyo was present, it would always be present now, but contained. He was looking at his hands. Naruto sat down next to him, not across from him. Next to him, close enough to be company without being an audience. They stayed like that for a while without saying anything, because there were moments where speaking first was the wrong move, and this was one of them. "I knew it might happen," Ryo said eventually. "The Mangekyo, I knew the mechanism. Every Uchiha knows the mechanism, He stopped. "Knowing the mechanism doesn't do anything. You can know exactly how a thing works, and it still works on you." "Yeah," Naruto said. Kenji was. He stopped again. "He was the best person I knew, not the strongest, the best." Naruto didn't say anything to that. There was nothing to say to that. He knew the shape of that sentence from the inside, had lived inside a version of it more than once, and he knew that the shape didn't benefit from being addressed. It just needed to be sat with. After a while, Ryo said, "The faction is manageable. Kota's supporters will fall into line. The succession is settled." He said it with the flatness of someone running a status report, because the status report was available and the other things weren't, not right now. "Politically, we're stable." "Good," Naruto said. "The alliance stands." "I know. I want you to know that the alliance stands, not contingently, not because the numbers favor it." He looked up finally at the ceiling of the witness hall, "because Kenji believed in it. He thought what you were building was the right direction." A pause. That matters to me as a reason." Naruto looked at him. at the 19-year-old who was now a clan head with a mangekyo and a grief that was never going to fully close and a clarity on the other side of it that was going to make him either remarkable or dangerous or both. He was right, Naruto said. About the direction? I know. Ryo put his hands down. I'm going to make sure of it. The witness hall was quiet. Somewhere outside, the Uchiha clan was continuing its evening, the routines of a community that had gone through a transition and was finding its new shape. Voices, fire, the distant sound of training that didn't pause for grief because it couldn't afford to. The warring states didn't pause. You should rest, Naruto said, soon. Ryo looked at his hands one more time. Then he put them flat on his thighs with the deliberateness of someone choosing a posture, choosing to be upright, to be present, to be the person the next hour required. Tell me what happened in the south. So Naruto told him, the trading post, the conversation, Black Zetsu's withdrawal, the Kaguya consolidation collapsing without its organizing intelligence. Ryo listened without interrupting, the sharing an off for once, listening with just his ears and his mind. When Naruto finished, Ryo was quiet for a moment. He's real, he said, not a question. The confirmation of something he'd suspected without a framework for it. Yeah, Naruto said. He's real, he's been real for a long time, he's going to keep being real. He looked at Ryo, but we know about him, that matters more than it sounds like it does. Why? Because he operates in the dark. He always has. He's patient and he's brilliant and he's been manipulating things for centuries, but all of it, every single move, depends on nobody knowing he exists. Naruto paused. We know, Tsunade knows, now you know. He let that sit. Every person who knows makes it harder, not impossible. Harder and harder compounds over time the same way his plans do. Ryo absorbed this. The Uchiha should know. Carefully, Naruto said. Tsunade's call on the specifics, but, yes, eventually, carefully. Agreed. He stood, finally, with the specific movement of someone whose body was tired in a way that sleep would help but not cure. The treaty signing. We should do it soon. Whenever you're ready. A week, Ryo said. Give me a week. He looked at Naruto for a moment. Thank you for coming. Naruto almost said, of course. Almost said we came as fast as we could. Both were true and neither was the right answer. Kenji was right, he said instead. About the direction, pass it on. Ryo held his gaze for a moment, nodded once the warrior's nod. Then he walked out, and the witness hall was empty. And Naruto sat on the stone floor for another few minutes with the weight of the evening before standing up and going to find Tsunade. He found her at the edge of the Uchiha territory, sitting in the grass at the boundary marker, doing the stillness that meant she was processing rather than resting. How is he? She asked, without looking up. Standing, Naruto said, which is what matters tonight. The treaty still holds. A week, signing in a week, she nodded. Then, after a moment, Zetsu's comment about Mito. Yeah, Naruto said. He sat beside her in the grass. The night was clear, the same impossible stars that were always visible out here where there was no artificial light to compete with them. I've been thinking about it since he said it. She's been working on a theoretical problem about permanent chakra seal integration, Tsunade said. The question of whether a seal can be designed to become part of the host's chakra network rather than sitting on top of it. I know. I told her the existing theory said it wasn't possible. You told me she thinks the existing theory is wrong. She is correct, Tsunade said, in the specific flat tone of someone who had spent 3 days working through an 8-year-old's theoretical framework and arrived at a conclusion they were still adjusting to. The existing theory is wrong. There's a pathway. It requires Uzumaki chakra density as the medium, and it requires a precision of application that is genuinely beyond most practitioners, but it exists. The theoretical architecture is sound. She paused. If she develops this further, if she gets to the application stage, she's going to invent the Jinchuriki sealing system, Naruto said. An early version of it, rougher, but yes. Tsunade looked at the stars. Possibly before she's 12. Naruto breathed in, let it out slowly. Is that bad? He asked, genuinely asking, not rhetorically. It's a tool, Tsunade said. Like any tool. The Jinchuriki system in our era was used to weaponize and isolate. That happened because of the context it emerged into: war, fear, the specific cruelty of using children as jinchuriki without informed consent. She paused. If the system is developed here, in this context, by a person who has grown up in a clan with a legal framework that prohibits exploitation and a medical institution that treats consent as foundational. Another pause. The tool might look different, might be used differently. Mito would make sure of it, Naruto said. Yes, Tsunade said. She would. They were quiet for a while. A night bird called from the tree line. The grass was cool and the stars were brilliant, and somewhere to the north, Najadai was a set of lit windows at the edge of the plateau, small from here, real from any distance. Zetsu said she was the most dangerous thing in this, Naruto said. Tsunade looked at him. He said you were. Naruto clarified. The systems, he said power is manageable but systems compound. He's not wrong about that. He also said everything cracks. Also not wrong. I told him we build habits of fixing things. He looked at the stars. I think I meant it. I know you meant it, she said. That's the thing about you. You always mean things, even when they're inconvenient to mean. A pause. It's occasionally annoying. Just occasionally, don't push it. He almost laughed. Caught it? Let it out anyway, because there was no reason not to. Out here in the grass with the stars overhead and the worst of the evening behind them, and the treaty signing a week ahead, and Najadai lit up in the north like something that had decided to exist and wasn't going to stop. Tomorrow, Tsunade said. Tomorrow, he agreed. They sat in the grass a while longer, not talking. Just present in the particular way that people who have been through something hard together are present afterward, companionably, without needing to perform anything, the specific comfort of shared ground. Then they stood up and walked north, toward home. 3 days after they returned, Mito did the thing that nobody in this era should have been capable of. It was a Tuesday again. Naruto had been keeping his calendar. She had been working since before sunrise. He knew because he'd sensed her chakra active during his dawn perimeter check. The dense, warm Uzumaki signature fully engaged at an hour when most 8-year-olds were still asleep. He'd noted it, flagged it for later, continued the check. He arrived at the training yard at mid-morning to find Tsunade already there, standing very still, watching Mito work. Mito was sitting cross-legged in the center of the yard with a seal array drawn on the stone around her. Not with ink, with chakra, rendered visible through a technique she'd apparently developed independently as a method of testing array architecture, before committing it to physical medium. The array was large. Larger than anything she'd attempted before, the geometry intricate and self-referencing, the kind of design that took practitioners years to develop the spatial reasoning for. She was running chakra through it. The effect was visible. A column of pale light, roughly the diameter of her shoulders, rising from the array and interacting with the natural energy in the air above her. Not destructively, the natural energy wasn't being consumed or converted. It was being integrated, drawn in through the array, processed through the seal architecture, and woven into the chakra field around her body, not sitting on top. Inside, the theoretical problem she'd been working on for 2 months. Solved, applied, working. Naruto stood next to Tsunade and watched. How long has she been doing that? He asked quietly. I've been here for 20 minutes, Tsunade said. She was already running when I arrived. A pause. The array is stable, she has control of it. Another pause. The nature-energy integration it's not complete, not even close. This is a proof of concept at low output, but the principle is functioning. She's 8 years old, Naruto said. Yes, Tsunade said. The column of light held for another 3 minutes. Then Mito released the technique in a controlled sequence, array closing in stages, energy dissipating cleanly, no sudden release, no instability. She opened her eyes, looked at her hands, made a small note on the scroll beside her, then she looked up and saw them watching. It works, she said. No triumph in it. Just the statement of someone who had been uncertain whether it would work and was now uncertain about different things. The integration pathway is functional. The efficiency is low, maybe 30% of what the theoretical should allow. The control requirement is high. She looked at the scroll. I need to redesign the array architecture to reduce the control overhead before it's practically useful. Tsunade walked to her, crouched down, did the diagnostic pulse, 20 seconds, longer than usual. When she looked up, her expression was doing the thing. The specific thing. The thing that Naruto had learned to recognize as Tsunade encountering something that exceeded the boundary of what she'd allowed herself to anticipate. The integration is clean, she said. No pathway damage, no instability residue. A pause. How did you solve the control overhead problem sufficiently to run this at all? I changed the direction, Mito said. The existing theory tries to push the seal into the chakra network. I pulled the chakra network into the seal instead. She showed Tsunade the scroll, the diagrams, the dense theoretical notation that she'd apparently developed a personal shorthand for over the course of months. The host network doesn't need to be modified. The seal adapts to the network's existing architecture. Tsunade read the scroll. She read it for a long time. This, she said carefully, is the most significant sealing theory development I have encountered in my lifetime, which includes having access to the full body of knowledge of an era a century more advanced than this one. She looked at Mito. You're 8 years old. You keep saying that, Mito said. It keeps being relevant. Mito looked at her hands. Something moved in her expression, not pride exactly, more the specific uncertainty of someone who has reached a point where the ground is new and they're not sure what footing to trust. Tsunade-sensei, if this works at full efficiency, if the control overhead can be reduced, what does it do? What is it for? Tsunade was quiet for a moment. It's for making the container and the contained the same thing, she said carefully. Instead of a seal on top of a person, it becomes a seal that's part of the person. The boundary between the two becomes not absent but integrated, cooperative. Mito turned this over. Like what Naruto has, she said. Both of them looked at her. His relationship with Kurama? She said without embarrassment or particular drama. She'd apparently worked this out at some point and was referencing it as a known quantity. That's not a normal Jinchuriki relationship. The seal isn't on top. It's different, cooperative like you said. She looked at Naruto. How did that happen? Naruto looked at Tsunade. Tsunade looked back at him with an expression that said your call. Slowly, he said. Over years, a lot of fights, a lot of conversations. A lot of choosing over and over to treat each other as partners instead of one of us being a container and the other being the thing inside it. He paused. The seal helped, but the seal wasn't the reason. Mito absorbed this with the complete focused attention she brought to everything that mattered to her. The reason was choice, she said. Yeah, Naruto said. She made another note on the scroll. She's going to keep going, Kurama said. She's not going to stop until she understands all of it. I know. That's either very good or very complicated. Yeah, Naruto said. Probably both. The treaty signing happened on a clear morning, 8 days after the succession, in the clan hall of Najidai. Ryo arrived with 6 witnesses, formal, protocol correct, his bearing carrying the particular quality of someone who had been through fire in the last week and come out not diminished, but clarified. He looked older than 19. He looked, Naruto thought, like someone who had decided to be the kind of person the next 50 years required, and was doing it consciously with his eyes open, knowing exactly what it cost. Kazura signed first. Then Ryo. Then Tsunade as the architect of the framework and Naruto, as Kazura had argued for a formal title here, spent a week trying to find the right word for what Naruto was relative to the clan, and finally wrote partner in the witness line and decided that was correct enough. Mito witnessed it from the east window. She was the youngest person in the clan, and she stood there with her scroll and her charcoal. And she watched 2 clans sign a document that her future, the future she was now going to live in this world, building this thing, depended on, and she didn't celebrate or react. She just watched and made a small note and went back to work. After the formal proceedings in the courtyard, Ryo stood with Naruto in front of the Uzumaki tree. The hardline faction, Ryo said. Kota's supporters. They're contained but not converted. I want to be honest about that. Converted takes time, Naruto said. Contained is enough for now. The tree is taller, Ryo said. He was looking at it, 3.5 meters now, the branches starting to spread in a way that would eventually shade a significant portion of the courtyard. Grows fast up here, Naruto said. Kurama-enriched soil, Ryo said. Naruto looked at him. Ryo's Sharingan activated briefly, just for a second, just enough to show that he'd been reading the nature energy in the plateau's soil for a while and had put the picture together. I'm not going to mention it in official settings, he said. But I wanted you to know I know. Okay, Naruto said. It's a good thing, Ryo said. Everything grows well here. He looked at the clan hall where the signing had just happened, at the training yards beyond it where Haruto was already running afternoon sessions, at the medical wing's lit windows, at the gate where Mito had appeared with her scroll and was apparently measuring something about the tree's growth angle. Everything grows well here, he said again, quieter, like he was noting it for the record. In the corner of the courtyard, a white tendril of something thinner than smoke retreated into a crack in the wall. Neither of them saw it, but Naruto felt it, a flicker at the edge of his sage sensing, gone before he could resolve it into anything specific. Zetsu, Kurama said. Watching, Naruto confirmed. Learning, Kurama said. Adjusting his model. Let him, Naruto said. Let him watch something that works and adjust his model around it. The tree's branches moved in the afternoon wind. The courtyard was warm. Inside the clan hall, the treaty document was being copied for both clan archives, and the copies would outlast everyone currently alive, and what was written in them would shape what came after in ways that nobody standing here could fully predict. That was how things worked. You did the thing, and then the thing kept happening after you, and you couldn't know all of what it became. You could only build it as well as you knew how and trust that people who grew up inside it would fix the parts you got wrong. Mito had finished measuring the tree. She made her note. She walked back inside, past Ryo and Naruto without stopping, already thinking about the next problem. 8 years old, headed toward everything. Good, Naruto thought. Very, Kurama agreed. End of Chapter 5. Here we go with Chapter 6. The world they left behind. Year 2 began the way good years tend to begin. Quietly, without announcement, the calendar turning while everyone was busy doing something else. Naruto noticed it during a dawn perimeter run. The same circuit he'd been running every morning for 14 months, the same plateau edge, the same sweep of sage sensing across the same 40-kilometer radius. But something was different in the quality of it, not the information coming in, but the texture of the receiving. He'd been doing this long enough that the land had started to feel familiar. Not the way a map feels familiar, intellectually, a thing you've studied. The way a place feels familiar when you've been moving through it in every weather and every season, until your body has its own memory of it that runs below conscious thought. He stopped at the northeast corner of the wall, where the stone was warmest in the morning because it caught the first light, and he put his hand against it. The wall was 2 meters thick. Chakra-compressed stone, Haruto's structural corrections incorporated into the second phase of construction. Reinforced at the base by a wood release technique that Haruto had developed independently 3 weeks ago, and that Tsunade had immediately added to the clan's formal training curriculum. The wall was part of the plateau now. The plateau was part of Naruto now, in whatever way places become part of people who build them. You're being sentimental, Kurama said. Probably. It's early for sentiment. Is there a designated time after breakfast, usually? Kurama said. You haven't eaten yet. Naruto almost laughed. He stayed at the wall for another moment, feeling the stone warm under his palm. Then he completed the circuit and went to find breakfast and found, as he did most mornings now, that the meal hall was already full by the time he got there. 314 people. That was the current census. The number Tsunade updated every 2 weeks with the specific care of someone who understood that a community was its people, countable and irreplaceable. Each one a data point that also happened to be a life. 314. up from 200 when they'd arrived at the plateau, up from 260 at the treaty signing, and the growth was accelerating rather than leveling because word moved faster than strategy did. And the word about Najidai had been moving for months. They came from everywhere. Senju family members from distant branches who'd been operating as independent small groups for decades, hearing that the main clan had found something stable and heading toward it. Uzumaki refugees, routed through the network that Maito's grandmother had become an informal hub for. The old woman had turned out to have extensive connections across Fire Country's Uzumaki diaspora, and had spent the last 8 months activating them with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of anchor point. Orphans from the clan conflicts further south, particularly the destabilization that had followed Black Zetsu's withdrawal from the Kaguya structure. The collapse of his organizing intelligence had made things messy in exactly the way he'd predicted. Multiple small clans, suddenly without the management that had been coordinating them, reverting to fractious, independent behavior. Tsunade's medical corps had been deployed into the worst of it. A deployment of medical care into a chaotic situation was also, as it always was, a deployment of presence. People knew where help was coming from, and some of them followed the help home. The meal hall at the year mark was louder than it had been at month 6. Fuller. The noise was different, not the careful sound of a community still assessing whether it was safe to be loud, but the specific, comfortable chaos of people who had decided they were home. Naruto got his food and sat where he usually sat, the table near the east window that had the best light, and Haruto appeared at his elbow approximately 40 seconds later, because Haruto had apparently decided at some point that sharing a table with Naruto at breakfast was his default position and had never asked, simply enacted it. The secondary water channel on the north face has a 15% flow reduction, Haruto said, instead of good morning, which was consistent with his general approach to conversation. From yesterday or ongoing? I noticed it yesterday. I'd estimate it started 4 or 5 days ago. He produced his notes board, which he carried everywhere, and which had evolved from a simple charcoal and wood situation into something more organized, multiple sections, indexed. The handwriting getting smaller and more precise as the months went on because Haruto had simply kept refining until the system did what he needed it to. Probable cause is silt buildup at the secondary junction. It needs to be cleared. I'll look at it this morning. I can clear it, Haruto said. He held up his right hand, palm forward, and a thread of wood-release energy moved through his palm, not a full expression, just enough to show that he was offering the specific tool. The wood release had developed steadily for 3 months since the first branch, not explosively, because that wasn't Haruto's style, but methodically. Each advance consolidated before the next one was attempted. He could currently sustain a meter-long expression for 2 minutes before his control required a rest, and the precision of the expressions was improving faster than the duration, because precision was a product of attention and attention was Haruto's defining characteristic. After training, Naruto said. After training, Haruto agreed. He sat, opened his notes to the current page, and began eating with one hand and reviewing something with the other. Naruto looked at him for a moment. 11 years old, the most methodical mind Naruto had encountered in 2 timelines. Writing training curricula for 8-year-olds, developing wood-release technique, managing water infrastructure, and eating breakfast simultaneously. Apparently, in the original timeline, Haruto didn't exist. His parents might. Some version of his lineage was somewhere in the historical record of the Senju clan, probably nameless. Haruto himself was a product of this, of Tsunade's genetic cultivation work, of the training program, of the specific conditions of Najidai. He was, in a literal sense, someone who had only become possible because of what they'd built here. The thought arrived and sat with Naruto in the particular way that large thoughts sat, not urgently but presently. Impossible to fully set aside. He ate his breakfast. The morning light came through the east window gold and clean. The legal framework document was completed on the 43rd day of year 2. Tsunade had been working on it in pieces since month 2. Sections drafted, reviewed by Kazura, revised, reviewed again. The slow accumulation of a governing philosophy rendered in language precise enough to mean what it said a generation after the person who wrote it was gone. She'd started it as an operational necessity, and somewhere in the drafting it had become something else. Something she was putting herself into in the way that builders put themselves into structures, not visible, not credited, but present in every load-bearing decision. She finished the final section at dawn, alone in the medical wing, and then she set the brush down and read it through from the beginning, which took 40 minutes, and when she was done, she rolled it and sat with it in her hands for a while. Naruto found her there because he usually found her when she needed to be found, which was one of the dynamics of their situation that neither of them discussed directly, but that had become reliable. He sat across from her and waited. "It's done," she said. "How is it?" "Good." She said it without self-deprecation and without particular pride. Accurate assessment. "It's the best thing I've written, which is," she considered. "It's strange to say that. I've written medical texts, research, diagnostic frameworks, all of it more technically complex than this." She looked at the scroll. "But this is the thing I'll have done that lasts. The medical techniques will be superseded. The training curriculum will evolve. The buildings will be rebuilt. This," she held up the scroll, "this is what determines what kind of place Najidai is when neither of us is here to run it." "What kind of place is that?" Naruto asked. She thought about it seriously. "A place where the answer to what can I do here is not determined by what you were born as or who your parents were or what someone decided about you at age 9. A place where the clan's investment in a person is not a bet on early potential, but a commitment to ongoing development." She paused. "A place where medicine is a right, not a reward. Where leadership is earned through demonstrated capacity and renewed through demonstrated accountability." Another pause. "A place where the clan head can be removed by the council if they stop serving the clan's actual interests rather than their position." "Kazura agreed to that clause?" "He suggested it," Tsunade said. "He told me he's watched 3 clan heads in his lifetime hold their position through force of personality long after their judgment had gone wrong. He doesn't want to be the 4th. She almost smiled. "He's a better man than his era deserves." "Most good people are," Naruto said. She looked at him for a moment. "The clause about children, the one protecting minors from combat deployment before 14. "Yeah, Kazura's daughter asked me why 14 and not 16. She set the scroll on the table. "I told her the honest answer, which is that 14 is a compromise between the ideal and the achievable. The ideal is that children are never deployed in combat. The achievable in this era is a floor below which we will not go." She looked at the window. She asked if the floor could be raised over time. "Can it? If the world changes enough, if the settlement structure becomes the norm rather than the exception, if enough clans adopt frameworks similar to this one." She met his eyes. "Which brings me to the thing I want to talk to you about." Naruto waited. "The document needs to be copied," she said. "Not just for the clan archive, distributed to the Uchiha for the treaty record, to the daimyo for the formal recognition record, and to the river clans, the surviving Kaguya-adjacent settlements, the Uzumaki Enclave network." She looked at the scroll. "Not as propaganda, as evidence, as a proof of concept that this kind of governing structure is possible, which is different from proselytizing." A pause. "People should be able to see that it exists. What they do with that is their decision." "Maito's grandmother's network," Naruto said. "Exactly," he thought about it. "The distribution of a governing philosophy through a medical and refugee network, reaching every significant population center in Fire Country and beyond. Not an army, not a conquest, just information. The specific, subversive, impossibly powerful act of showing people that a different way of organizing things existed. That's how it spreads," Kurama said quietly, "not by force, by example." "How many copies?" Naruto asked. "As many as we can make," Tsunade said. I have 31 members of the medical corps who write legibly enough for formal documents. I'll put them on it. Naruto looked at her, at the scroll on the table, at her hands beside it, at the dawn light through the medical wing's window catching the gray in her hair that had become more visible over the last year. Not aging exactly, she'd had the strength of 100 seal maintaining her for decades, and it continued to maintain her. But something in how she held herself had changed. The specific quality of someone who had stopped running. "You look different," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Not like that," he said. "I mean, you look like you're somewhere, not like you're on your way somewhere else." She was quiet for a moment. "I used to think the Senju legacy was a weight," she said. "Everything my grandfather built, everything that fell apart. The expectation that I should fix it, continue it, be worthy of it." She looked at the scroll. "I spent 60 years being the granddaughter of someone legendary and finding that identity unlivable." A pause. "Now I'm the person who designed the governing structure of a settlement that didn't exist 2 years ago. I'm the person who identified 7 children with would release potential and built the conditions for that potential to express itself. I'm the person who took a refugee girl out of a creek bed and gave her the tools to invent ceiling theory that this era doesn't have the framework to fully understand yet." She looked at her hands. "That's mine. It's not inherited. I made it." A pause. "It turns out that's significantly easier to inhabit." Naruto looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah," he said. "It is." Haruto grew a tree on the 48th day of year 2, not a branch. Not a technique demonstration. A tree 3 meters tall, self-sustaining, roots into the ground, the full expression of wood release in its generative form. He did it in the training yard, alone except for Naruto, who was there because Tsunade had asked him to be present for this session. And it took him 4 minutes of sustained effort and a level of concentration that left him visibly tired afterward. Sitting in the shade of the thing he'd just created, he ran his hand along the bark, put his forehead against it, stayed like that for a while. Naruto didn't say anything. Some moments needed silence. "My grandfather told me a story," Haruto said, eventually. His voice was quiet, muffled slightly by the tree. "About his great-grandfather, who was a Senju clan head before the era of the current conflicts. He said there was a time when Senju were known for the land, not for fighting, for making things grow." He lifted his head, looked at the tree. "I thought it was just a clan story, the kind you tell children about better times." "It wasn't just a story," Naruto said. "No," Haruto put his hand flat against the bark. "I can feel the chakra in it. It's mine, but it's also separate now, alive separately." He looked at Naruto. "Is that what would release always feels like?" "I think so," Naruto said. "I think that's what makes it different from other techniques. You're not projecting, you're creating." Haruto absorbed this with his usual thoroughness. "Tsunade sensei says there are 6 other children with the potential. At least 6. Probably more in the new arrivals. She hasn't finished assessing them." "I can help with the training," Haruto said, not offered tentatively, stated as a logical conclusion. "I know," Naruto said. "She's already planning on it," Haruto nodded. He stood, dusted off his knees, picked up his notes board. He made an entry, precise, brief, about the technique's duration and the control requirements. Then he looked at the tree one more time, the specific look of someone noting a thing carefully before moving on to the next thing. "Good," he said, to the tree, or to himself, or to the general category of things working the way they were supposed to work. Then he went to teach his afternoon session. Naruto sat under the tree. Haruto had grown and thought about Hashirama. Not the legend, the person. A man who had never existed yet in this timeline. Whose birth was now something like 60 years away, in a world that was going to be shaped by what was happening here in ways impossible to fully trace. Whether Hashirama would still come into being as history had produced him, the same genetics, the same extraordinary convergence, was a question Naruto had no answer to. What he had instead was this tree. Growing in the training yard, created by an 11-year-old who had learned to do it because someone with future knowledge had seen his potential and built the conditions for it to emerge. That was the answer he was going to have to be satisfied with. Not a guarantee, A beginning. It's enough, Kurama said. Is it? It's the only kind of answer available, Kurama said. Beginnings don't come with guarantees. You know that better than anyone. Yeah, Naruto said, I know. The daimyo's formal recognition came on the 61st day of year 2. Ikiro returned, the same man, visibly more impressed and less willing to perform condescension, with a document bearing the daimyo's seal and a secondary document that authorized Najidai's sovereign status within Fire Country's political structure. Not subordination. Recognition. The specific legal acknowledgement that Najidai was a real thing that the existing order had decided to accommodate rather than challenge. Tsunade accepted both documents with the calm of someone who had written the draft of the second document 3 months ago and sent it to the daimyo's office through a medical corps contact. So the recognition was less a surprise than a confirmation that the drafting had been persuasive. The formal reception afterward was the first large-scale diplomatic event Najidai had hosted Uchiha representatives, river clan delegates, 3 of the absorbed minor clans' leadership, the Uzumaki Enclave's informal council, and the daimyo's envoy, all in the same space, eating the same food, in a building that Naruto had built and Haruto had structurally improved, and Tsunade had designated for exactly this kind of use. Kazuya presided. He was good at it, the specific authority of a man who had been running things for 30 years and knew how to fill a room without dominating it. His daughter, Ami, was present as a medical corps representative, which was the first time a clan head's immediate family had appeared in a formal function in a non-ornamental capacity. Nobody commented on this. It was simply the way things were now. Ryo was there, which meant the Uchiha were there, which meant the alliance was visible and real in a room full of people who were deciding what the region's political future looked like. He arrived with 6 representatives, stood across the room from the daimyo's envoy, and by the end of the evening had managed 3 separate private conversations with people who had entered the room as potential Uchiha adversaries and left it as something different. He was getting good at this. Better at it, Naruto thought, than any version of an Uchiha leader that history had produced, because he'd had the benefit of watching Tsunade operate for 8 months and had apparently been paying close attention. Mito appeared at the reception for exactly 45 minutes. She arrived, ate efficiently, had 2 conversations that Naruto observed from across the room. One with Ryo's second in command, who spent most of it visibly recalibrating how he was talking to an 8-year-old, and one with Ikiro, the daimyo's envoy, which lasted 12 minutes and ended with Ikiro writing something in his official notebook. She left before the formal speeches. He found her in the medical wing afterward. She had a new problem. She always had a new problem. This one was the control overhead reduction she'd been working on since the proof of concept, the architectural redesign that would make her living chakra integration theory practically applicable rather than theoretically demonstrated. Good reception, he asked. Efficient, she said, which was Mito's highest compliment for a social event. The envoy is more intelligent than he presents. He asked 3 questions that were actually good questions. What did you tell him? The truth. That Najidai's stability is a function of its systems rather than its personalities, which means it doesn't depend on any specific person remaining in authority to continue operating correctly. She didn't look up from the scroll. He wrote it down. Why did he write it down? Because rulers are always worried about succession and instability, she said, with the matter-of-fact certainty of an 8-year-old who had apparently thought about political theory enough to arrive at conclusions that took most people decades. Telling him the system is more stable than any individual person is telling him that investing in Najidai is a stable investment. That's the thing he needed to hear. Naruto looked at her for a moment. Did Tsunade tell you to say that? No, she finally looked up. Should she have? No, he said. You figured it out right. She nodded, accepting this, and went back to work. I really am not sure about that one, Kurama said, with a kind of awed uncertainty he almost never expressed. Whether she's going to be fine. Whether the world is going to be ready for her, Kurama said. The conversation Naruto had been not having with Tsunade for 2 years happened on the 73rd day, not because it was scheduled, not because something triggered it. They were sitting on the rock face, the one they'd found on the first night, which was now technically inside Najidai's outer wall but still felt like the outside. The specific geography of a place that had been a thinking spot before the walls went up and remained one after. The plateau was lit below them, every building inhabited, every window alight. The courtyard tree, 4 meters now, branches spread wide, was a dark shape at the center of it, recognizable even at night by the shape it made against the stars. "I stopped thinking about going back," Naruto said. Not as a confession, just as a statement of something he'd noticed. Tsunade didn't answer immediately. She was looking at the settlement. "When?" she asked. "I don't know exactly, gradually." He thought about it. "I think it was around month 3 when Mito made her first containment seal work." He paused. "I realized I wasn't thinking about fixing the old timeline. I was thinking about what she was going to figure out next." "I stopped earlier," Tsunade said. "Month 1 maybe, when Haruto didn't die." A pause. "The man, Daisuke, he would have died that first night. He had a wife and 2 daughters. I kept thinking about that, about those 2 girls growing up without him, and I'd fixed it, so they weren't going to, and the version of reality where they did was gone, sealed off." She looked at the courtyard tree. "I didn't grieve the timeline we came from." "Is that," she stopped, "wrong?" Naruto asked. "I keep waiting to grieve it," she said. "Everyone I knew there, everything that happened," she paused, "but the grieving never fully comes. And I don't know if that means I'm broken or if it means the timeline doesn't feel like a loss because I understand what it actually was." "What was it?" Naruto asked, genuinely asking. She was quiet for a moment. "A first attempt," she said, "by people doing their best with incomplete information in circumstances they didn't design. Producing something that had extraordinary things in it and catastrophic failures in it, like all first attempts." She looked at her hands. "We didn't come here to save the future we knew. We came here because there was nowhere else to go. And somewhere along the way the work became real enough that the thing we left stopped feeling like the thing we were trying to preserve and started feeling like," she searched for it, "like a rough draft, something that pointed toward this." The night was quiet around them. Inside the walls, the settlement breathed. The sounds of 300 people living, small and collective, fires and voices, and the specific rhythm of a place that had learned to sleep without posting a terrified guard because it finally believed in its own existence. "You think it worked?" Naruto asked, the question he'd been carrying since month 3, varying in form but consistent in substance. "The world we're building, does it actually fix what broke?" Tsunade looked at the settlement for a long time. "The Uchiha massacre," she said. "In our timeline, it happened because resentment calcified over decades. An isolated population, systematically distrusted, given no real seat at any table, until the isolation became its own kind of prison, and the despair of one extraordinary person became catastrophic." She paused. "The Uchiha in this world are signing our treaties and eating our food and arguing with Haruto about water channel engineering. Ryo's representatives and our medical corps have been running joint training for 2 months. The culture being built between the 2 clans, it's not perfect, it's not without tension, but it's a culture of contact rather than separation." She looked at the stars. "The conditions that produced the massacre don't exist. They were never allowed to form." "The Uzumaki," Naruto said. "The Uzumaki are here," she said. "Mito's grandmother has built the most effective refugee network in Fire Country. 314 people in this settlement includes 67 Uzumaki. Their sealing knowledge is being integrated into the formal training curriculum instead of being isolated in a single clan that other clans fear and therefore eventually destroy." She paused. "And Mito is here, doing what she's doing." Another pause. "The conditions for the Uzumaki annihilation were fear of a power source that nobody understood and everybody coveted. What happens to fear of something when you build it into the institutional center of your society?" "It becomes pride," Naruto said. "Or at least familiarity," Tsunade said. which is close enough. Black Zetsu, Naruto said, is still out there. She didn't soften it. Is still patient, is still pursuing the same goal through different means in different regions. She looked at her hands. What we've done is disrupt his operational timeline in this region and remove the specific conditions that made his plan tractable in the original century. He has to rebuild. That takes time. A pause. We've also produced, entirely by accident, a person who is working on the theoretical foundation of the one sealing system that could contain him permanently. She looked toward the medical wing, where Mito's window was lit, always lit. She doesn't know that's what she's building. She's just following the problems. A pause, but she'll get there. How long? Naruto asked. I don't know, years, maybe a decade. A pause. She's 9. She'll be ready, Naruto said. Yes, Tsunade said. She will. The fire in the courtyard below moved in the wind, throwing shadows across the tree's branches. The tree itself was absolutely still, the way things were still when their roots were deep enough that surface weather stopped being a relevant concern. The will of fire, Naruto said. Tsunade looked at him. I've been thinking about it, he said. The whole time, the philosophy that Konoha was built on, the idea that the village is the people, that love of the village protects it, that each generation passes that will to the next. He looked at the settlement. I carry that. In my bones, basically, it's what I am. He paused. And you spent 60 years watching it consume everything that mattered to you, everyone had asked to sacrifice for it. Yes, she said, so which of us is right? She was quiet for a long moment. Both of you, she said finally, or neither. The will of fire is a real thing. I've seen it work. I've seen people act from it genuinely and produce genuine good. The problem isn't the philosophy. The problem is what happens when the philosophy becomes the justification for asking people to die for an institution rather than asking the institution to be worthy of the people. She paused. What I've been building here, the legal framework, the medical rights, the training access, the anti-exploitation clauses, it's not a rejection of the will of fire. It's a demand that the institution earn it. She looked at the courtyard. Hashirama had the right instinct. He just didn't build the structure that could sustain it after he was gone. So we build the structure, Naruto said. We built the structure, she said. Past tense, already accomplished, already real. He looked at the settlement, at the 314 people living in it, at Haruto's tree in the training yard, at Mito's lit window, at the treaty document in the clan hall archive and its copies moving through a distribution network toward every corner of the region. He thought about the great ninja wars, the first, the second, the cascade of destruction that his era had emerged from scarred and shaped. Without Black Zetsu's management, without the political conditions he'd been cultivating for a century, without the specific resentments and isolations that he'd engineered into the fabric of inter-clan relationships, the wars would still come. Conflict didn't disappear because you built something good, but something good changed the equation. Changed who sat down together before the fighting started, changed how quickly the talking happened and what the talking could accomplish. The first and second great ninja wars in this world were going to be different. Smaller, maybe. Shorter, almost certainly. Not because the world was better. It wasn't, not entirely, not yet. But because the architecture of the relationships between the major clans had been laid differently and architecture mattered. That wasn't a guarantee. It was a better chance. He'd made his peace with that distinction somewhere around month 4 and had been maintaining the peace ever since with the specific ongoing effort that peace always required. Kit, Kurama said, Yeah, I want to tell you something. Okay. In the timeline we came from, Kurama said, I spent most of my existence as a weapon, sealed into people. Used against people, feared by everyone, a pause. Here I have been something else. Enriching soil, steadying your sensing range, watching this place grow, another pause. I'm not sure I knew what it felt like to just exist in a place. Without being pointed at something, Naruto was quiet for a moment. How is it? He asked. Strange, Kurama said. Good strange. A pause. The kind of strange that feels correct once you've adjusted to it. Yeah, Naruto said. I know what you mean. Below them, the courtyard tree moved in the wind. The settlement breathed. 314 people, and the number was going up. He visited Mito at midnight. Not planned, he'd been heading back from the rock face and seen her window still lit, which was normal, and stopped, which was also normal, and knocked on the frame, which was their established signal. She was at her work table with 4 scrolls open and a new problem on the current page. She had the look she got when she was close to something. Not excited, not agitated, just very intensely present, the full weight of her attention focused on the narrow point of whatever she was working through. "You should sleep," he said from the window frame. "Soon," she said. He came in anyway and sat on the floor, the only available sitting space that wasn't covered in scrolls, and looked at the current scroll from the wrong angle, which meant he couldn't read it but could see the shape of what she was doing. "The control overhead reduction?" he asked, getting closer. "I think the issue is the array's energy distribution. I've been treating it as even distribution, but the host's chakra network isn't evenly distributed, it has centers and peripheries. If I map the seal's energy distribution to the network's actual topology rather than a theoretical average." She trailed off, writing something. "Yes, that's it. That's the correction." She wrote for a minute. He watched her work. This was something he'd started doing around month 3 and had continued doing because it was, he'd decided, one of the better things available to him. Watching Mito solve problems was like watching someone build something in real time. The pieces coming together in a sequence that was never quite predictable even if the destination was. When she finished the notation, she sat back, looked at it, looked at the ceiling. "Naruto-sensei," she said. "Yeah, you're from somewhere that doesn't exist anymore." He'd been waiting for this conversation in one form or another since month 3. "Yes. And what I'm working on," she looked at her scroll, "the ceiling theory, the living integration system, it's related to things that happened there, things you know about." "Yes," he said. "Are you going to tell me?" She asked it the way she asked everything, directly, without pressure, genuinely interested in the answer rather than interested in any particular answer. He thought about it carefully. "There are things I won't tell you," he said, "because knowing them would change what you're building in ways that I think would make it worse. The best version of what you're working toward is the version you arrive at on your own, without someone else's destination in your head." He paused. "But there are things I'll tell you when you need them, when the question you're asking is the right question and the information will help you answer it correctly rather than shortcut it." She considered this. "That's a reasonable approach," she said. Yes. Prior knowledge contamination is a real problem in theoretical work. If you tell me where I'm going, I'll try to get there instead of finding the better path." She picked up her brush again. "I'll ask when I need to." He looked at her, 9 years old, at a work table at midnight, discussing prior knowledge contamination in theoretical research as a casual topic. In a world that hadn't been built yet, in a place that didn't have a name in any history. "Mito," he said, "are you okay? Not the work, you." She paused, set the brush down. It was one of the rare moments where she shifted from the work-facing version of herself to the other one, the one that was still a child, that had been in a creek bed with 3 other children not so long ago, holding a stick. "I think so," she said. "I miss my grandmother sometimes. She's in the East residential block and I see her every day, but I miss," she searched for it. "I miss what it was like before, when it was just us. Even when it was bad, it was us." She looked at the window. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah," Naruto said. "It makes complete sense." "Is that grief?" she asked, not rhetorically, actually asking the way she asked things she didn't have a framework for yet. "That's exactly grief," he said. "You can love where you are and still miss where you were." She sat with that for a moment. Then she nodded, not solved exactly, but placed correctly, filed in the right category. "The seal I'm working on," she said. "When I finish the theoretical framework, the full one with the control overhead corrected, I'm going to test it." "Okay," he said. "It'll need a willing host," she said. "Someone with specific chakra characteristics." She looked at him. "I'm going to ask you." He looked at her. "Not now," she said. "When it's ready, when I'm certain." A pause. But I'm telling you now so you have time to think about it. He thought about what she was building. The living integration seal. The cooperative containment system. The thing that, in the original timeline, had eventually become the mechanism of his relationship with Kurama, not the same architecture, not the same path, but the same destination. The thing Zetsu had said would be larger than either of them had prepared for. What do you think? He asked Kurama. I think, Kurama said slowly, that the version of this seal built by someone who has watched us for 2 years, who understands the difference between a seal as containment and a seal as partnership, who is working from a theoretical foundation that explicitly prioritizes integration over domination. A pause. I think it might be something genuinely new, not a version of what I had in the old timeline, something better. Naruto looked at Mito. When it's ready, he said. Yeah, I'll be there, she nodded, picked up her brush, went back to work. He sat on the floor a while longer, not talking, just present in the late-night quiet of a settlement that was asleep around them, the small sound of wind and the distant fire watch and somewhere in the training yard. A tree that had grown in an afternoon and was growing still. The last morning of Year 2 was a sunrise Naruto watched from the wall. Same wall he touched every morning, same northeast corner, same first light. He'd been doing this for 14 months, and the ritual had accumulated the weight that repetitions accumulate. Not habit exactly, more the specific gravity of something done often enough to become meaningful. He put his hand on the stone. Below him, the settlement was waking up. Cook fires first, the smell of them carrying up in the cold air. Then voices, the specific morning frequency of 300 people negotiating the transition from sleep to day. Then the training yards, Haruto's early sessions starting before half the settlement was properly awake, because that was Haruto's idea of a reasonable schedule, and his students had apparently decided to accept it. Mito's window went dark. She'd been up, probably all night, probably finished the correction she'd found at midnight and moved 3 steps past it by dawn. She'd sleep for a few hours and be back at the table by mid-morning. Tsunade was already in the medical wing. She was always already in the medical wing. Kazuura was walking the inner perimeter. He did this every morning, a private circuit. The clan head's daily affirmation that the thing he was responsible for still existed. He stopped when he saw Naruto on the wall and raised a hand, the minimal greeting of a man who communicated in gestures and meant every one of them. Naruto raised a hand back. The sun came fully up over the eastern hills, the first light hitting the wall, the stone warm under his palm. 314 people. A treaty, a legal framework, a medical institution, a training system that was producing results that wouldn't make sense to anyone outside it for another 50 years. 7 children who would grow up to make the ground grow. 1 child who was going to rewrite the theoretical foundation of how chakra and intention and containment related to each other. And Black Zetsu, somewhere, still patient, still ancient, still pursuing the same goal. The variable that ensured nothing was guaranteed. The reason the work couldn't stop. You understand, Kurama said, that this is not a story with an ending. Yeah, what you've built doesn't stay built without maintenance. The alliance doesn't stay intact without people choosing it continuously against the alternatives. A pause. The legal framework Tsunade wrote is only as real as the next generation's commitment to upholding it. The training program only compounds if someone keeps running it. I know, Naruto said. You're not going to be here forever. Neither is she. I know, so what happens after you? Naruto looked down at the training yard, where Haruto was already running his session. At the medical wing, where Tsunade was teaching someone something that would outlast her teaching of it. At Mito's dark window, behind which a 9-year-old was sleeping with the next theoretical breakthrough already forming in whatever dreams she had when she finally slept. Them, Naruto said, you trust them. I trust what they're becoming, Naruto said. I trust what they've already become. He looked at the tree in the courtyard. At the branches spread wide enough now to shade the benches that the clan had built around it, the specific human response to a good piece of shade, which was to make it into a gathering place. I trust the habits. A long pause. That, Kurama said, is the will of fire. Naruto breathed in. Breathed out, not the will of fire as a philosophy recited and hung on a wall, not as a justification for sacrifice or a reason to ask people to die. The thing underneath all of that, the actual thing, the thing Hashirama had meant and the village had sometimes embodied and sometimes failed to. The simple, stubborn belief that what you build for other people matters, and that mattering is enough, even if you aren't there to see all of what it becomes. He took his hand off the wall. Below him, the training yard noise increased as more students arrived. Haruto's voice carried up, specific, patient, correcting something without dismissing the attempt. In the courtyard, early risers were gathering at the benches around the tree. In the medical wing, a light came on in the second room, which meant Ami was starting her morning rounds. Naruto looked at all of it for one more moment. Then he went down to find breakfast, and the morning continued, and the work continued. And the world they were making kept making itself, imperfectly, stubbornly, with the specific resilience of something that had decided it was going to exist and was not interested in arguments to the contrary. In the years that followed, the settlement called Najidai became the model from which a dozen similar structures drew their governing principles. The legal framework Tsunade had drafted was copied and distributed until it reached communities that had never heard of Najidai but had heard of the ideas, which traveled as ideas do, faster than armies, quieter than prophecy. Arriving in places their authors never intended and finding purchase in conditions their authors never imagined. The Senju Uchiha alliance held, not without difficulty, not without conflict, but it held, renewed by each generation's choice to inherit it, and the inheritance became habit, and the habit became culture, and the culture became the ground that everything else grew from. The great ninja wars came because the world was still the world and conflict was still conflict. But they came into a region where two of the most powerful clans had spent 50 years building channels of communication, and where a medical institution that owed nothing to any single clan's political interests had established itself as a resource that everybody wanted to preserve. The first great ninja war was shorter than history would record it. The second never reached the scale of devastation that the original timeline had documented. Nobody knew why in either case. Nobody had the framework. The reasons were buried in decisions made 50 years prior by people whose names had already begun to fade from the official records by the time the wars arrived. Naruto trained 8 students who developed would-release expression. Of those 8, 4 trained the next generation. The technique that had been a singular miracle in one timeline became, in this one, a living tradition, not common, not easy, never without cost, but present. Continuous. A thread that didn't break. Mito completed her theoretical framework in the spring of her 15th year. The testing, conducted with the willing partnership of the one person whose chakra characteristics made him the correct subject, produced results that neither of them fully anticipated. Not because the theory was wrong, but because the theory was right in ways that exceeded the theoretical model. What emerged from the testing was not a ceiling system in the traditional sense. It was closer to what Naruto had described once at midnight to a 9-year-old in a lit window, the container and the contained becoming the same thing, the seal that didn't restrain, the agreement that was also an architecture. Black Zetsu operated for another century, as patient as ever, as old as ever, adjusting his methods to account for the world that had formed differently than the one he'd planned for. He was never entirely stopped, but he was never again able to construct the specific conditions he required. The world kept being maintained, kept being fixed when it cracked, kept being renewed at the joints where it was weak. He could wait out dynasties, he could wait out monuments. He could not wait out a habit that was being actively practiced by people who understood why it mattered. This was, in the end, the only kind of victory available. Naruto and Tsunade stood at the helm of nothing, in the formal sense. Najadai had governance structures that didn't depend on any individual by design. They were not rulers. They were not legends, not yet. Legend required distance, and they were very present, very daily. Very much the people who checked the water channels and corrected the training technique, and sat in on the medical corps review meetings, and ate breakfast at the east window table with an 11-year-old who had strong opinions about structural engineering. What they were was here. That was enough. It was, in fact, exactly enough, neither more nor less than what the moment had asked for, and what they had chosen each morning, starting from a rice paddy and a wrong century. And a choice that hadn't felt like a choice at the time, but had turned out to be the most important one they'd ever made. The roots went deep, the branches spread, the world kept going. End of chapter 6. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you do, please make sure leave a like, share, and subscribe.